Chapter 3:12. Itachi's dark pupils flashed with a cold light, and his murderous intent was awe-inspiring. His whole body was like 1,000-years-old ice, revealing a coldness that could freeze everything. Itachi naturally knew about Orochimaru. He had a deep yearning for the Uchiha clan's Sharingan. The invincible Sharingan was a fatal attraction for Orochimaru, who didn't have a Kekkei Genkai. This is the last thing I will do for Akatsuki, to get rid of Orochimaru. Itachi's deep and bright pupils were surging with anger, and he murmured to himself. As for Orochimaru, he didn't put him in his eyes. Under Manjikyu Sharingan, all insects have nowhere to hide. Cough! The blood in his lungs surged, and scarlet bloodstains broke out of his mouth uncontrollably. Itachi's eyes became dimmer, and he quickly took out a few black pills and swallowed them. After a long time, he calmed down. Aware of the rapid loss of vitality, he looked at Sasuke more firmly. In the Rain Village, Dustless and Itachi parted ways and came back again. In the small courtyard, staring at several people chasing and playing, Dustless's mouth swept a soft smile, sitting casually under the shade of a tree, quietly watching this harmonious scene. Little brat is really naive. This world is not suitable for people like you. Staring at several people in front of him, Dustless said to himself. Although he said this, he didn't have any displeasure. He just quietly enjoyed the scene in front of him. His expression was serene, and he blended into nature. Dustless, Sama. Red Lotus was the first to notice Dustless's arrival, and said in a panic. At the same time, he cursed secretly. Just now, he was playing with these two little girls, and he completely forgot that he was Dustless's subordinate. Red Lotus's target was naturally Hinata and Cheyenne of the Land of Demons. Wuxia nodded slightly. His clear eyes stared at Red Lotus's body. He sighed inwardly that this was also a peerless beauty. That faintly discernible bloody temperament added some enchantment to Red Lotus. Even with his willpower, his mouth and tongue were dry. The invisible charm that was emitted was the most fatal. Put away your lecherous eyes. A dissatisfied shout rang out. Looking up, it was the young girl, Ziyuan, who was glaring at Dustless. Her arms were baring her fangs and brandishing her claws. She looked ferocious as if she wanted to swallow Dustless alive, which made Dustless feel quite embarrassed. However, Dustless was an extremely thick-skinned person. In just the blink of an eye, his expression returned to normal. His expression was indifferent, as if nothing had happened. The speed at which he changed his expression was astonishing. Do I look like that kind of person? That was just an illusion. Seeing that Hinata, Cheyenne and Red Lotus were all staring at him in shock, Dustless said with a straight face, pretending to be displeased, but in fact, he was so depressed that he wanted to vomit blood. In particular, Ziyuan's smug little face was particularly disgusting. He's really caught in his own trap. With a wry smile, Dustless casually threw 3 rings of different colors to the 3 women, and without looking at their reaction, he said softly, "Today's Akatsuki is already in disarray, and it won't be long before all of them die." After saying that, Dustless's voice stopped. Looking at the 3 women, he was about to speak, but Red Lotus's voice sounded. "Dustless, Sama means that we should form a new Akatsuki." Red Lotus was also a smart person. A bright light flashed in her eyes, and she immediately guessed Dustless's intention. She looked at him in disbelief, and her pretty face was full of astonishment. The Akatsuki organization was composed of S-class defectors, including Dustless, and several super-strong people. All of them had shocking strength. "Dustless, Sama, are you kidding me?" Taking a deep breath, Red Lotus touched the unique ring of the Akatsuki members in her hand and asked in a flattered manner. Looking at Dustless's appearance, she knew that he was going to form a new Akatsuki organization. Hinata and Cheyenne looked at Dustless incredulously. In the end, those guys are outsiders, including Itachi. They are not trustworthy people. At the critical moment, they can betray us at any time. Wu Chen said seriously, indicating that he was not joking. Looking at the whole world, there was a saying that it was difficult to support a single tree. It was necessary to give these most trusted people absolute power. Among the 3 women, only Hinata's strength was the most heaven-defying. Otsutsuki Haguro had already implanted his Otsutsuki blood into Hinata's body, and it was only a matter of time before she awakened the Tensigan. After all, Dustless, a member of the Uchiha clan, can awaken the Tensigan. There is no reason why Hinata can't awaken the Tensigen, especially since her Byakugan concentration is extremely high. In the future, her dojutsu will definitely not be worse than Dustless. Red Lotus was second, followed by Cheyenne. As a Miko-sama, her strength was also quite good. However, this little girl was too playful, and Haguro spoiled her very much, so her strength was slightly inferior. But even so, in the face of a Kage-class powerhouse, the three women have at least a 70% chance of winning. The three women looked at each other with a warm feeling in their hearts. Over the years, even if Dustless has been very good to them, this was the first time he admitted that they were the most trusted people. Don't be modest. You are qualified. Squeezing out a kind smile, Dustless encouraged the slightly timid three women. Some people in the organization may not be as good as you. Perhaps you think that the progress you have made over the years is insignificant, but your achievements are untouchable to others. Dustless said. The members of the Akatsuki are just Kage-class members, and these three beautiful girls in front of him are fully qualified. The most important thing is that compared to those sanctimonious members of the organization, the three women in front of him were more trustworthy. Even Hinata was the same. The Uzumaki Naruto of the past has become a passerby in her long life. Not worth mentioning. Time is the best medicine. The light of dawn shines all over the world, and the darkness cannot hide. The new Akatsuki will be an invincible existence, like a bright sun covering the world, and the darkness that tries to resist will be destroyed. Chapter 313. Dustless always believes that it is impossible to go wrong to plan ahead. Uchiha Madara can be resurrected intact. A good plan can definitely change everything. Zetsu, is the child's game over? Raising his eyelids and looking at Inyang Zetsu expressionlessly, Dustless asked indifferently. His light voice didn't sound happy or angry, as if his emotions were taken away, and there was no emotion. It's not over yet, but that guy Deidara doesn't seem to be Sasuke's opponent, and he is at a disadvantage. White Zetsu's eyes flashed with surprise, and he immediately said truthfully. He is suppressed. Black Zetsu's voice was also not calm. Obviously, he didn't expect that Deidara, who is an S-class rebellious ninja, would be so casually suppressed, especially by a teenager. Sasuke is his natural enemy, and Deidara's jutsu is eaten by him. White Zetsu explained softly after a moment of silence. This is an innate advantage. Just like water and fire, he is completely in a passive mode. But a mere 3 tomo can suppress Deidara. That kid also has some skills. Dustless smiled and was not surprised that Sasuke could suppress Deidara. After all, he killed Deidara in the original work and used his Chidori to suppress Deidara almost all the way. Finally, Deidara was forced to self-destruct to end his life. Dustless, Sama, isn't it time? Staring at Dustless's face, Black Zetsu's eyes were blazing, and he said bluntly in a hoarse voice, "We should immediately encourage Pain to attack Konoha, collect the other half of Kyuubi's Yang chakra, and squeeze out his last value. In fact, resurrecting Jubi only requires a small amount of Kyuubi's chakra. But there are also flaws. Jubi resurrected in such a hasty manner is not complete. Just like when he was resurrected in the original work, Jubi without Kyuubi's chakra only has 6 tomo Rinnegan. This old guy seems to be impatient." Dustless secretly looked at Heizu from the corner of his eyes. Most of the tailed beasts had gathered, and only the last 2 were left. This old man was anxious in his heart. The plan that he had been planning for thousands of years was about to succeed. How could he not be anxious when he was kept in suspense? But it is indeed time to attack Konoha. Nodding gently, Dustless's eyes flashed with a touch of determination. As Black Zetsu said, Uzumaki Nagato's body was gradually approaching collapse, and he must be squeezed dry. A while ago, White Zetsu also reported that Uzumaki Naruto had disappeared, and there was no trace of him in Konoha's ninja village. According to Dustless's guess, that kid should have gone to Mount Mayaboku to learn senjutsu. But this matter can be left to Obito. I don't need to participate. Dustless said coldly. Obito was more suitable for this kind of swindling. At the same time, he had other things to deal with. Itachi wanted to use coercive means to reverse Sasuke's fate, but Dustless wouldn't let him do that. It's best to let him and Uzumaki Naruto kill each other. Let him die in the hands of the most trusted person. This way of death is suitable for my stupid brother, Uchiha Sasuke. Dustless sneered. Uchiha Sasuke wanted to kill him again and again. Dustless will never let it go. If he can let him die in the hands of Uzumaki Naruto, that will be his final end. Oh! Dustless, Sama is still so wicked. White Zetsu looked at Dustless's ferocious face and couldn't help but laugh strangely. Black Zetsu, on the other hand, was unmoved. He has witnessed the rise and fall of the tide for thousands of years. Not to mention Dustless, he has seen more horrible things. The ninja world is such a cruel place. The winner is the king, the loser is the bandit, and the loser is the target of bullying. If Dustless didn't keep up with the times and stood out from thousands of mortals, he would definitely be very miserable now. Well, right at this moment, a wisp of surprise suddenly flashed past Wu Chen's eyes. The viciousness in his eyes instantly vanished and was replaced by a puzzled expression. His face also started to change and carried a puzzled expression. It can't be that Lord Wu Chen's benevolence has been triggered and he's planning to let that kid off, right? Seeing Dustless's hostility disappeared in an instant, White Zetsu spoke with a mocking tone. It was because Dustless won't disappear like this that he dared to do so. If Dustless was a cold and bloodthirsty person, he would never dare to talk to Dustless in such a tone. That's not it. Dustless shook his head and turned a deaf ear to White Zetsu's ridicule. Uchiha Sasuke also needs to be squeezed dry before he can be abandoned. It seems that someone has invaded the rain village. The sensing barrier I set outside was touched by a stranger. Frowning, Dustless expressed the doubts in his heart. Over the years, he has arranged many barriers outside the rain village, and he can easily sense intruders. Now the mysterious intruder is obviously a ninja from outside the village, and his strength is quite good. He deftly avoided many barriers set before and successfully invaded the rain village. His courage is not small. I don't know how ignorant the intruder's strength is. Or he has full confidence in his strength and can come and go freely in the Akatsuki's base. Black Zetsu's eyes flashed with contempt and ridicule disdainfully. There is a road to heaven, but you don't take it. There is no door to hell, but you are so stupid. After a while, the doubts on Dustless's face turned into ridicule, and his puzzled expression was also swept away. His scarlet pupils began to rotate rapidly, revealing the evil Sharingan. Jiraiya, this is the end of your life. Chapter 314. Everyone knows the name of Jiraiya, and his bitter inspirational history can be called a model for civilian ninja. Many ninjas in the ninja world use Jiraiya as their goal in life to motivate themselves. There is no other reason. Jiraiya is also immortal. He has no Kekkei Genkai. He has achieved his current achievements step by step. He is a model for civilian ninja to become a god. It turned out to be the guy who can use Senjutsu. The range of perception of Senjutsu is extremely powerful and wide. If it's him, he can indeed find Dustless Sama's barrier. After hearing from Dustless that it was Jiraiya, Black Zetsu's eyes flashed with understanding. Obviously, Black Zetsu admires Jiraiya very much. Senjutsu, a ninjutsu that uses natural energy, is not something that everyone can learn. Looking at the entire ninja world, the number of people who can use Senjutsu is less than 5. It's reasonable for Jiraiya, who has Sage Mode, to detect Dustless's barrier. It's a pity. With a sigh, Black Zetsu no longer said anything. From now on, the genius ninja who can use Sage Mode will disappear from the world. This kind of trivial matter should be solved by pain. But I still have some personal friendship with Jiraiya. His life will be taken care of by me. For the sake of our friendship in the past, I will leave his body intact. Wu Chen spoke with fervor and assurance. His tone was meticulous and exceptionally serious. Most of the people who died in his hands were tragic. They were either brutally dismembered or directly hit by the terrifying Yasakani no Magatama. Their end was particularly miserable. The whole body can be described as a luxurious top VIP treatment. To some extent, Jiraiya is a character who runs through the entire world. Whether it is Uchiha Obito or Uzumaki Naruto, they have an inseparable relationship with him. It can even be said that Namake's Minato and Uzumaki Naruto are the inheritors of his will. Isn't this a bit of a fuss? That kind of trash can be dealt with by pain. White Zetsu frowned and was puzzled. Dustless doesn't need to deal with Jiraiya himself. Pain can easily defeat him. Dustless only needs to be a quiet spectator. Even if Jiraiya has Senjutsu, in front of Pain who has Rinnegan, he is still a weak ant. Heiju stared at Dustless, and after a long time, a look of understanding flashed across his face. His tone also had a rare hint of ridicule as he said in a hoarse voice, "Sir Dustless is still a child at heart. I'm afraid this is just an appetizer before the main meal, just a warm-up." The drizzle was hazy while the horizon was dim. Lightning flashed through the sky in an instant from time to time, and it added a great deal of oppressive gloominess for no reason. It seemed as if it was the netherworld, and the village before him was isolated from the world and filled with an indescribable color of despair. The burly man in a cloak strolled around, his eyes vaguely staring at the people passing by. His eyes occasionally flashed, taking in all the changes in the expressions of the people passing by. Although the Rain Village has come out of the shadow of war, it's beyond my imagination that peace has come so quickly. The current Rain Village is much more stable and peaceful than the era of war and starvation. The white-haired man was secretly surprised. He thought that the Rain Village should be in a period of civil strife. After all, at the end of World War II, the Rain Village was still in the era of war. Now it seems that he thought too much. The Rain Village not only ended the war many years ago, but it was also very peaceful. Even if most of these people's expressions were like Walking Dead, it silently proved that the Rain Village was now in a period of peace. Rumble. A rumbling sound came from his stomach. The white-haired man realized that he had not eaten anything for a few days and his stomach was rumbling with hunger. At this moment, there was a whiff of the fragrance of steamed ham, which made him drool. Unable to bear the call of the worm in his stomach, the white-haired man quickly ran to the tofu shop and took off his raincoat, revealing a strong face and strong body. The forehead guard with the word oil floating on his forehead was clearly visible. There is no doubt that only the legendary toad sage Jiraiya dressed like this in the ninja world. Is this guy reincarnated from a hungry ghost? He is about to be kicked into the underworld, but he is still in the mood to eat and drink. Zetsu, who was peeping in the dark, was speechless. He stared at Jiraiya who was wolfing down the food in the store in the distance and couldn't help but ridicule him in his heart. Dustless has been waiting for a long time in the no-man's land not far away, and this guy is still in the mood to eat and drink. A pitiful person must have something hateful. Black Zetsu stared at Jiraiya indifferently, without any emotion. Perhaps in his eyes, Jiraiya was already a dead body, not worthy of his sympathy. A man's words are good when he is about to die. A bird's cry is sad when it is about to die. Why are you worse than a bird? You don't have to be so ruthless, Black Zetsu. Seeing Black Zetsu's indifferent look, White Zetsu began to complain again. Hearing this, Black Zetsu's eyes flashed with a touch of ridicule, but he just said casually, "You are too sentimental, White Zetsu. Jiraiya is just looking for death. For a person who is about to enter the end, it is not worth feeling sentimental, and there is no need to reveal his true feelings. You and I are just created. The extravagant emotions of human beings should not appear on us. Completing the task is our mission. You don't know how to be romantic." Curling his lips, White Zetsu no longer talked nonsense. He just looked at Jiraiya with pity. Indeed, as Black Zetsu said, Jiraiya was caught in his own trap. This was the price of entering the Rain Village without permission. Once he stepped out, he would never regret it. Zetsu's body sank deep into the ground, and his aura and traces disappeared. In the world of rain, there was only Jiraiya who was wolfing down his food. His desolate figure had completely merged with the entire world, and he had forever stepped into the door of the underworld that couldn't see the light of day. Chapter 3:15. In the world of rain, all living things were so helpless and fragile. In the face of the wrath of God, they could only let it happen. They were endlessly ravaged by the raindrops. No one could resist the force of nature. They could only bear it silently. But even so, everything has its limits. When a person has the ability to change the elements of nature, it also means that from then on, it no longer belongs to the human industry. Ring, 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 ring. The crisp and pleasant sound of the bell was like the lingering sound of the mountain spring. The oriole flew out of the valley and formed a different scenery in the dark and oppressive night sky. Finally, there was a little vitality. The black figure stood in the rain, letting the wind and rain hit him, looking very powerless. However, the strange thing was that whether it was the raindrops falling from the sky or the oncoming wind, They all seemed to be forcibly distorted by some special force. They couldn't get close to him at all. The quiet face slightly loosened, revealing clear eyes. The dark ink-like eyes revealed the light of wisdom. His eyes indifferently looked at the world in the rain, and his voice resounded through the dark void. "Too slow, Jew? Ka ka ka." As Dustless's voice fell, the ground beside him burst open, and huge nepenthes drilled out of the ground, revealing a different figure. It was Jew. "That guy is gnawing on the head." White Zetsu gave Dustless a helpless look, then spread his hands and said. There was a generation gap between Jiraiya's strong temperament and his style of living. "It's his last dinner." Hearing this, Dustless just nodded thoughtfully, but he didn't take White Zetsu's words seriously. Jiraiya looked good, but in fact, he was a rough person. If he thought that he was clumsy and negligent, he would be asking for trouble. The majestic perception spread out, and the wind and grass within a radius of several kilometers were taken into the eyes. After noticing that Jiraiya didn't appear, he closed his eyes again and began to rest. Ju didn't make a sound and just stood quietly beside Wu Chen. Boom, boom, boom. Suddenly, an ear-piercing sound of thunder resounded through the clouds. Tens of thousands of lightning bolts directly detonated the sky. The dark horizon was filled with light, and in an instant, it was as dazzling as day. Lightning flashed and thunder rumbled. In a trance, a figure suddenly appeared on the sparsely populated land. When Dustless opened his eyes again, he could see a tall and sturdy man in front of him. Even though he was wearing a raincoat, he could still see his sturdy body. "Jiraiya, long time no see." The corner of his mouth curled into a smile after a long separation. He then glanced at Jiraiya in the raincoat. His expression lowered, and his face remained indifferent. After a short reunion, they were going to be separated forever. It was better not to see each other. Whoosh whoosh whoosh. In the black night sky, there were no human sounds. What responded to Dustless was the sharp sound of several missiles tearing through the air. Old friends fight when they meet. I waited for you on a rainy day, but you repay kindness with enmity. After that, staring at the dark cold light flying toward him, Dustless's eyes flashed with contempt. He pretended to be sad and sighed. The appearance of sighing was no different from the real thing. The acting was extremely realistic. Whoosh whoosh whoosh. Several black kunai shuttled through Dustless's body, but it didn't have any effect. "Put away your tricks. I don't buy it." Jiraiya glared at him, his eyes were bloodshot, and murderous intent gushed out like a flood. He suppressed the monstrous killing intent in his heart and asked coldly, "Kakashi and the members of Team 10 are all missing. Is it your organization's people who did it?" Although he had doubts, Jiraiya was convinced that it was the Akatsuki who did it. In this world, only the crazy people of the Akatsuki dared to attack Konoha so unscrupulously. "Aren't you already sure in your heart? Do you still need me to explain it in detail? Why do you ask when you already know the answer?" "Jiraiya, as you said, their deaths were indeed caused by the Akatsuki." Casually glancing at Jiraiya, Dustless's face was full of frivolity and indifference, and continued to say, "The death of Kakashi and others was not only caused by the Akatsuki, but the person who killed them is me." Whoosh. As soon as Wu Chen's voice fell, a black shadow galloped over. In the dark night sky, there was a bright light, and a perfectly straight blue brilliance pierced through in a straight line. "You're so old, but your speed is still so fast." His eyelids gently lifted, and his eyes stared at the giant energy ball in the sky. He gently raised his arm, aiming at the huge Rasengan, and a mocking smile appeared on his face. Boom! The air suddenly groaned, and invisible energy ripples spurted out from Gao Yang's arm, and went straight toward the Rasengan. Boom boom boom! Attacked by the repulsive force, the huge blue ball burst open, and the scattered energy wave swallowed Jiraiya, the caster, and the tyrannical force of the explosion mercilessly threw him out like a kite, and a deep gully was drawn on the ground. After a while, seeing that Jiraiya was still lying on the ground, Dustless frowned and said coldly, "How can such a vulgar substitution technique deceive my eyes? Quickly show your true body, Jiraiya." Boom! Jiraiya, who was sent flying before, turned into a dark green wood. Ka ka ka! The ground under his feet suddenly burst open, and a narrow and tough tongue drilled out of it, and tightly bound Dustless's feet. At the same time, a hot wave of fire came from the front. Senjutsu. Gomen. Chapter 316. Dustless felt weird. Jiraiya and the two toads on his shoulders cooperated so well. If he didn't look at Jiraiya's appearance, Dustless would definitely think that he was the same kind of toad. It's hard to imagine that a person and a toad can cooperate so well. Dustless stared at the incoming fire wave and shook his head speechlessly. Gomen was used by the two toads and Jiraiya. The timing must be perfect. Any physical attack is ineffective against me. His whole body was covered with a bright golden luster, and Wuxia's body lost its texture. He simply ignored the tongues that bound his feet and turned into a golden beam that went straight toward Jiraiya against the sea of fire. The monstrous sea of fire was ignored. Dustless's palm flashed with a dazzling light, and the high-density golden light condensed and compressed. A sharp long sword suddenly appeared in Dustless's hand, and it swept straight toward Jiraiya's head. Before the attack was launched, Jiraiya felt that there was a big guillotine on his head. This damn pervert! Jiraiya cursed in his heart, and calmly moved aside. After several battles, he already knew Dustless's ability to move at the speed of light. The biggest flaw is that he can't turn when moving, so when Dustless's body was covered with golden light, Jiraiya took the opportunity to move sideways to avoid a head-on confrontation with Dustless. Whoosh! Ka-ka-ka! A huge golden slash shot out from the long sword, and suddenly a slender straight trench appeared on the ground, extending straight to the distant sky. The earth was divided into two, and the soil hidden deep in the ground was directly exposed to the erosion of raindrops. His reaction is quite fast. Seeing that Jiraiya dodged the chop, Dustless nodded slightly. If Jiraiya was torn by the chop, the best outcome would be his head being separated from his body. The difference between us is just that great. It's like the difference between an adult man and a baby in swaddling clothes. Just surrender, and I'll give you the most humane way to die. On account of our past friendship, I'll leave your corpse intact. If you continue to resist, your corpse might not even be left behind. I'm not very good at something as delicate as controlling power. Dustless shrugged as he held the golden heaven cluster cloud sword in his hand. It's too early to sentence me to death. Uchiha Dustless. Looking at Dustless with uncertain eyes, Jiraiya suddenly felt a chill in his heart. He suddenly felt that his best friends in this life, whether it was Orochimaru or Dustless, had left him one after another. Maybe he was really wrong. His mind was in a trance for a while. Little Jiraiya, if you want to die, don't implicate me and the old man. You dare to be distracted while fighting with him. You really don't know how to write the word death. Shima Sennin angrily rebuked Jiraiya. This kid is simply reckless. The two sides are originally from different dimensions. Now he dares to be careless and distracted in front of Dustless. It's no different from directly reincarnating and committing suicide. I'm sorry, Tusen, I was really careless just now. Jiraiya, who recovered from his reverie, smiled bitterly, secretly scolded himself for being careless, and immediately focused on Dustless. Now is not the time to be depressed alone. Don't be timid, little Jiraiya. The enemy is very powerful, but with the help of that Sama, it's not impossible to win. Fukasaku Sennin comforted Jiraiya. It's true that Dustless is unreliable, but they also have a super powerful monster on their side, and it's an old monster who has lived for thousands of years. His small toad eyes locked on Dustless, and Fukasaku Sennin showed a relaxed expression. Looking back leisurely, more than 800 years have passed in a blink of an eye. Looking at his life, he has many children and grandchildren. Even if he dies, he has no regrets. His small eyes widened in an instant, glaring at Dustless. Fukasaku Sennin resolutely said, "As long as the strongest evil in this world is eliminated, even if I die here, I have no fear." Shima Sennin also nodded. As long as Dustless, the great villain who affects the world peace, dies, even if she really dies here today, it's worth it. In exchange for a bright future for future generations, there's nothing to lose. Well said, I'm so moved that I'm about to cry. Squeezing out a sarcastic smile, Dustless coldly mocked. A stinky toad dares to judge right and wrong, shameless. You have the right to give yourself justice, but what right do you have to conclude that I'm evil? The Kusanagi sword in his hand flashed with a dazzling light, and then it slowly dissipated, lost its texture, and finally disappeared. Cold light surged in the depths of his eyes, and chakra began to rage all over his body. Dustless's hands formed a seal, and in the blink of an eye, the seal was completed. A blazing sea of fire erupted. Fire release. Grand fire annihilation. The torrential flames whizzed through the air, reaching a diameter of 30 to 40 meters. Even the raindrops falling from the sky were instantly evaporated as they came crashing down. Is this an S-level ninjutsu? No, it should be beyond S-level. Jiraiya's face was pale. The ordinary fire release was unexpectedly used by this guy to the level of S-level. This can no longer be described with the word abnormal. At the same time, he didn't forget to take out a number of scrolls that he prepared in advance, bit his finger, and pressed them without hesitation. Bang bang bang! Accompanied by several loud noises, groups of toads suddenly appeared, and their color and shape were all different. Obviously, it couldn't be any genjutsu or clones. At a glance, there were no less than hundreds of toads. Oh, this is interesting, the toads are mobilizing. Looking at the scene in front of him with interest, although Dustless was very interested on the surface, he was very puzzled in his heart. He stared at Jiraiya's scroll and quickly felt relieved. Summoning jutsu is actually a kind of space ninjutsu. Although he didn't know what method Jiraiya used, it is a fact that he summoned hundreds of toads. Bang bang bang. Hundreds of toads in groups sprayed a huge stream of water, gathered together, condensed a majestic water source, and went straight to the fire wave. It's true that more ants can be of use. His eyes narrowed slightly. Dustless secretly thought. These groups of toads used senjutsu, and the power was many times stronger than ordinary water release ninjutsu. The two opposite attributes inevitably touched together, and the void rose into the sky with blazing steam, and everything around was covered with white smoke. Toads are lining up to die. In that case, you bunch of trash can go to hell. Dustless sneered again and again, and the anger in his heart erupted like a volcano. The blazing fire wave was enough to sweep the entire sky. Being disturbed again and again, Wuqian's heart was already full of anger. His chakra began to go berserk, and the whole earth began to buzz and tremble. It was as if the end of the world was coming, showing a tendency of collapse. Mokuton. Advent of the world of trees. Thick and solid dark green giant logs broke out of the ground, turning the surrounding ground into a dense forest. The thick and solid logs were as ferocious and terrifying as an evil beast. They swarmed towards the hundreds of toads and frogs in unison. Shodame-sama's secret jutsu. Mokuton. Jiraiya's face fell instantly. Mokuton is one of the strongest Kekkei Genkai, and there is no Kekkei Genkai comparable to Uchiha. Only the Uchiha family's Sharingan can barely compete with it. Don't panic. That Sama is here. Fukasaku Sennin's calm and powerful voice spread out along with a strong chakra fluctuation, like a hurricane, spreading to every inch of the corner. The panicked toads calmed down. Suddenly, he remembered that the Toad King who lived for thousands of years was also here, and it was the strongest existence in Mount Mayaboku. Brats these days are all so strong. The vicissitudes of life spread out, and the breath of decay in it was full of endless emotions, and even time couldn't penetrate and erase it. The tyrannical sound wave seemed to contain magical power, causing countless ripples in the void. Boom boom boom. The huge toad fell from the sky, and its huge body made the earth tremble fiercely, and directly crushed the oncoming dark green wood. This group of fellows is really moving out in full force. Those damned toads. Raising his eyelids, Dustless stared at the giant toad in front of him, and he could clearly feel the huge chakra in his body. There were countless disgusting pustules all over his body, and it looked extremely disgusting. What was even more unusual was that this ugly toad had a gentle smile on the corner of his mouth. It was the great toad immortal of Mount Mayaboku. You can save the world, but you can also destroy the world. And the path you have chosen now is the path of destruction. The wise toad eyes stared at Dustless, and the great toad immortal said with emotion. This was his prophecy for Dustless, and it was the first time in his life that he had such a strange prophecy. Being able to create and destroy the world, this kind of ambiguous prophecy appeared for the first time. This guy has a huge natural chakra in his body. As expected of a monster who lived for thousands of years, the silence of the years has made the chakra in his body to be so huge. Dustless's face was full of surprise. The so-called chakra in the body of the great toad immortal could no longer be described as big, and it could only be described as boundless. What puzzled Dustless the most was what method this guy used to summon so many toads, and this was already beyond the scope of the spirit summoning technique. He lifted his gaze and looked at the so-called Great Toad Immortal. He was probably related to the old monster who lived for thousands of years. I thought that since you have lived for thousands of years, you would have wisdom and would be smarter than these juniors. Now it seems that I have thought too much. A beast will always be a beast. How can you judge it by the standards of a human? Dustless mocked coldly, and he held a contemptuous attitude towards this so-called Great Toad Immortal who lived for thousands of years. It was fine if he hid in Mount Mayaboku peacefully, but he had to come out and meddle in other people's business and dig his own grave. Bastard, how dare you spout nonsense? Today I will let you experience the might of Mount Mayaboku. After being mocked by Dustless again and again, the Great Toad Immortal could no longer keep his face. No matter what, he was still someone who lived for thousands of years, and now he was being mocked by a junior who had surpassed him. How could he not be angry? Boom, boom, boom. The Great Toad Immortal opened his big mouth, and his big mouth that was full of mucus eventually gathered countless water streams. On the surface, it looked ordinary and there was nothing special about it, but in reality, there was a secret behind it. This guy is indeed an old monster who has lived for thousands of years. He is so proficient in celestial techniques. Frowning, Dustless's expression froze. He could clearly feel that the water streams were not ordinary. They were rapidly condensing, forming a high-density and high-pressure water stream, and there was also the presence of celestial techniques in it. Do you think I'm invisible? Do you think I'll watch you prepare a big move without doing anything? With a flash of ruthlessness in his eyes, Dustless formed a mudra with one hand, and his gaze was focused on the body of the Great Toad Immortal. The majestic chakra that contained a huge amount of vitality began to gush out, and an indifferent voice resounded through the sky. In the sky, countless red round logs could be seen faintly falling from the sky. Celestial technique. Bright God Gate. The black and red round dots enlarged, and in an instant, one could see the round logs that were covered by dark clouds falling. The number was so large that it could not be estimated. Looking at it, it almost covered the entire sky. Boom, boom, boom. Suddenly, dust flew everywhere, and the ground began to tremble. Ka ka ka. The sound of the ground breaking spread, and the ferocious crack swallowed the surrounding ground. Many of the toads were smashed into a bloody mess. Still want to struggle? Idiots, the technique that could even bind the 10-tailed beast. Do you think it can't bind a group of clowns like you? Staring at the toads that were not smashed to death, Dustless's face was cold, and he did not hide the sneer on his face. If this group of toads could break free from such a strong sealing technique like the Bright God Gate, it would be too funny. All of you die. His pupils suddenly enlarged, and the red round logs seemed to be summoned. They began to tremble slowly, like a bottomless black hole in the depths of the universe, madly swallowing the chakra in the toads' bodies. There were even some that were directly sucked until only the skeleton was left. Boom, boom, boom. At the same time, the suppressed Great Toad Immortal unleashed a furious attack. The thick water pillar of celestial technique whizzed over, and it could easily crush dozens of mountains. The sharp water cannon pressured over, and it wanted to grind Dustless into pieces. Idiot! I've said before, physical attacks don't work on me. You didn't listen at all. Shaking his head, Dustless said helplessly. The ability of elemental transformation was too overpowered, and it could almost ignore all physical attacks. Even from the moment he ate the glint fruit, the world could not touch it anymore. His body flashed with a golden luster again, and Dustless easily dodged the incoming water cannon. At the same time, the red round logs that pressed on Great Toad Immortal's body suddenly began to absorb the chakra in his body, madly swallowing everything, including his vitality. In just a few breaths, he turned into nothingness and completely died. Jiraiya stared blankly at the tragic scene in front of him, and his mind stopped thinking. One of the 3 holy lands, Mount Mayaboku, was so easily destroyed. Suddenly, there was a sharp pain in his lungs, and he turned his head in surprise. It was Dustless with an indifferent face, and the golden long sword penetrated his body. Chapter 317. Jiraiya's pupils were gray, and his eyes were dull, completely losing the luster that a human should have. The golden sword inserted in his chest was quickly absorbing his vitality. It's over, Jiraiya. The gap between you and me has been like this since the first time we met. Not only has the gap between us not shortened, but because you're still in the same place, you've fallen far behind me. Poochie, Dustless said indifferently. As for the two toads on his shoulder, they had been sucked dry by Dustless's bright god gate, until only their bones were left. Moreover, they were already in their prime. Just a slight touch and they would turn into ashes. Jiraiya's face became even paler, and he fell to the ground helplessly. The drizzle made his face all shitty. Wuchen glanced at him indifferently. When he was about to speak, Jiraiya's voice came first. The content of his words made him frown straight. He looked at Jiraiya with a confused expression. Naruto will inherit my will and pass on the will of fire. Jiraiya's dry mouth squirmed, and he said breathlessly, and his eyes even flashed with a boy with golden hair and a sunny smile. Boring, just a little kid who learned senjutsu, and he wants to shake the world, stupid. A few months ago, White Zetsu sent news that Uzumaki Naruto suddenly disappeared, and there was no trace of him in Konoha's ninja village. According to Dustless's guess, he went to Mount Mayaboku to learn senjutsu. Dustless took back his sight from Jiraiya, and he passed by Jiraiya without the slightest pause. He didn't have much to say to a dying man. As for Jiraiya's body, it was naturally taken care of. With White Zetsu's corpse, Jiraiya's body would never rot out of thin air. Jiraiya has fallen, and now it's time to encourage Uzumaki Nagato to attack Konoha instead of paying attention to the duel between Jiraiya, Itachi, and Deidara. Dustless, Sama. The ground at his feet suddenly burst open, and Zetsu's figure drilled out of the ground. He looked at the flattened ground with astonishment, and couldn't help but take a deep breath. In particular, Feng Hua's broken bones shocked him even more. Even the internal organs like blood have been devoured. It should be the wood style. Only the wood style has such a terrifying devouring ability. Heiju's eyes widened, and he took in the scene in front of him. He hadn't expected Dustless's mastery of the wood style to be so terrifying. Originally, wood style could only devour the opponent's chakra, but Dustless's move was beautiful. Unprecedented, he directly used the opponent's entire body as nourishment. His methods were truly cruel. Black Zu sneered in his heart. The more ruthless Dustless was, the happier he was. This was because such a person would not be able to control his emotions and devote himself to perfecting the Eye of the Moon plan. Compared to the hazy rain in the rain-hidden village, the sky on the other side was clear and cloudless. Deidara stared at the figure in front of him with a pale face. If his eyes could kill, Sasuke would have been a skeleton now. Deidara's piercing gaze turned him into a stick. Bastard! Are the bastards of the Uchiha family sent by God to deal with me? Deidara's face was even more ugly. He who always cared about his image, couldn't help but swear. The anger in his heart had been completely ignited. His dissatisfaction with Sasuke was far more than Dustless and Itachi. Dustless and Itachi didn't need any attribute restraint, but defeated him with overwhelming strength. But Sasuke in front of him was different. He only relied on the ability of attribute restraint to defeat him. Although Ninja's duel was not despicable, Deidara's heart couldn't help but burst into anger. Losing was really humiliating. Because of Reiki, his clay bombs were destroyed by Chidori. In front of this pair of eyes, any technique you use is ineffective. Sasuke stared at Deidara indifferently. His breath was calm. Compared to the irritable Deidara, he was much calmer. He looked down at Deidara with a victorious posture. His eyes were sharp, without the slightest emotional fluctuation. Obviously, he already regarded him as a dying prey. What an arrogant look. Compared to Itachi and Dustless, you are much more arrogant. The anger in his heart was restrained. Deidara calmed down in an instant and said to Sasuke with a calm tone. The calm tone seemed to accept his fate. Seeing this, Sasuke's brows tightened, and he was secretly on guard. Now Deidara gave him a particularly dangerous feeling. Under the calm look, there was a madness that he had never seen before. Tell me about Itachi, and I will let you go. With a sigh of relief, Sasuke decided to let Deidara go once. The people of the Akatsuki organization were complete lunatics. He had no grievances with Deidara in front of him, and he didn't want to kill him. Hearing this, Deidara just stared at Sasuke expressionlessly. Chakra's fluctuations calmed down, and the murderous aura stopped. It seemed that he was going to accept Sasuke's conditions. Since then, I have hated this tone very much. It's just like those two unsightly guys. As expected of the three brothers, Deidara's eyes fell into emptiness. He began to recall Dustless and Itachi in the past. He clenched his fists, and his tone was much lower. The murderous aura that had been silent broke out again. The surrounding temperature suddenly dropped to the freezing point, and a murderous atmosphere filled the air. Under Sasuke's surprised gaze, Deidara suddenly tore his coat, revealing a ferocious mouth on his chest. You, Itachi, and Dustless all have the same tone. You always have the tone of eating others. This ridiculous arrogance, did you inherit it along with your Kekki-eye Genkai Sharingan? Especially your eyes that look down on my art. It makes me even more uncomfortable. This technique was originally prepared for Dustless and Itachi. Now I can only use it on you. Gotcha? After that, Deidara connected the thin line from the gap in his chest, revealing a ferocious big mouth, and at the same time, stuffed a large amount of explosive clay into it. In just a moment, Deidara's body was eroded by the black lines. In the blink of an eye, it spread to the whole body, slowly shrinking until it finally turned into a black chakra ball, floating in the air. That idiot chose to self-destruct. Zetsu, who was watching in the dark, couldn't help but admire Dustless. Because Dustless said in advance that Deidara might directly self-destruct to end himself. Zetsu didn't believe it at first, but now Deidara really intends to do so. It seems to be true. That is indeed the ultimate art in Deidara's mouth. Black Zetsu secretly murmured, thinking of the terrifying range of self-destruction, and said in horror, Deidara, that crazy madman, seems to want to kill Hoodlum together. Let's withdraw quickly, or we will be affected by the self-destruction. Half of Black Zetsu's face, which was as black as ink, became even darker. For a while, he was horrified. The terrifying explosion range reached a shocking 10 kilometers. No one could ignore his existence. But Sasuke, that kid, is definitely finished. To be honest, I don't really like him. That arrogant expression makes me want to beat him up. White Zu laughed without any conscience. His tone was filled with schadenfreude. Humph, the people of Uchiha clan are not so fragile. I don't know if others will kill us. If we don't leave, we will definitely be buried with this land. With a snort, Black Zetsu was quite dissatisfied. Sasuke was Indra's reincarnation. He was not so fragile. Although he was also curious about whether Sasuke would be killed, compared with his own life, even the King of Heaven was not worth mentioning. Black Zetsu cherished his life more than anyone else. He also had a meticulous plan, the Eye of the Moon plan. How could he die peacefully before it was successfully implemented? Missed a good show. With a faint sigh, White Zetsu also went into the ground to avoid the explosion. As Black Zetsu said, compared with his own life, nothing was worth exchanging. After a while, the small black sphere obviously reached the limit of what it could bear. The surface of the sphere swept a dazzling white light. After the small sphere was replaced by the white light, it began to tremble and expand without limit. Boom, boom, boom. The harsh roar resounded through the sky, and the whole earth trembled fiercely as if a magnitude 10 earthquake occurred. The surface was easily torn apart like paper. Looking up, they saw the silver-white light covering the sky. In an instant, it covered the range of tens of kilometers. It was no different from the end of the world. Any matter touched by the white impact was swallowed and annihilated in the blink of an eye. Looking down from the sky, a huge crater suddenly appeared on the previously intact surface of the earth. That kid is really smart, using Manda's life in exchange for his own life. Dustless, who was quietly peeking at the situation, muttered something and nodded slightly. While fighting, Sasuke used Sharingan to control Orochimaru's psychic beast, Manda, and used reverse summoning technique to ensure that he was spared. Dustless, Sama's next plan is... Zetsu's body appeared beside Dustless and asked cautiously. Deidara had already died. The next target was undoubtedly one of Dustless and Itachi. It's just two kids fighting. Let Sasuke and Itachi kill each other. After Itachi dies, I will tell Sasuke the truth about Itachi. There is no need to participate. Chapter 3:18. It was impossible for Itachi to kill Sasuke, but Sasuke hated Itachi so much that he couldn't wait to get rid of him. Therefore, the duel between Itachi and Sasuke was doomed from the beginning. In short, one was willing to be beaten, and the other was willing to be beaten. Both of them were willing to fight each other. Moreover, Dustless thought that there was nothing wrong with killing one of them. Compared to the scheming Itachi, Sasuke was much easier to fool. Dustless hummed a song all the way back to his home in the Rain Village. He jumped and jumped along the way. It was not difficult to see that he was particularly happy with the death of his brother. It seemed that he had seen the bitter look of the future Sasuke after he knew the truth. Dustless raised a comfortable smile. The so-called brotherly feelings had no market for Dustless. After all, Sasuke was still crying and chasing after him a while ago. Walking home leisurely, Dustless was about to comfort Luo when an uninvited guest immediately blocked the door and stared at the smiling Dustless. If I didn't guess wrong, Itachi and his brother Sasuke, who are also your two brothers, are about to start a life and death duel. You still have the mood to smile. A beautiful woman came into view. Her beautiful eyes blinked. Every frown and smile was particularly enchanting. Her watery eyes were like gems. The person who spoke was Conan. Brother. Dustless glanced at Conan contemptuously and said indifferently, "If people don't offend me, I won't offend them. If people offend me, I will pay them back 100 times. I didn't send them to heaven in advance, but let them live for so many years. I feel like a living bodhisattva, Conan." Everyone had their own standards, and Dustless was no exception. Sasuke and Itachi had wanted to kill Dustless time and time again. Now that the two of them had survived until today, it was already a great gift for them. That's true. Conan was speechless. Indeed, as Dustless said, Itachi and Sasuke had both exposed their murderous intent to him. Even if Dustless killed them on the spot, it was reasonable. After all, no one would let the enemy grow. To a certain extent, the fact that they were still alive today was indeed Dustless. Even if Dustless treats Itachi and Sasuke as brothers, these two brothers may not be able to be compared to Dustless, especially Sasuke, who is aiming to kill Dustless. Cut the crap. You're not a good person. Tell me, what kind of bad luck do you have that you're looking for me to fill in your hole? Wu Chen rolled his eyes at Xiaofan snappily and looked straight at her. Wu Chen asked bluntly. This little girl definitely didn't have any good intentions looking for him. Hearing this, Conan's pretty face was slightly red, and she couldn't help but feel embarrassed. She did have something to ask Dustless for help, and this help was very difficult. She wasn't sure if Dustless would agree. I hope you can go to Konoha with Pain to capture Kyuubi. You know Nagato's body. I'm a little worried about him. Facing the strongest Bijou in the legend, even if he has Rinnegan, I'm afraid he may not be its opponent. Conan gritted her teeth and expressed her inner worries. Nagato's body was overwhelmed. It's not an exaggeration to say that he won't be able to live for a few years. Now he has to fight with the strongest Bijou, Kyuubi. Only God knows the outcome. Fighting with Kyuubi means that he has to use Rinnegan's eye power. He even has to use some super powerful forbidden technique to subdue Kyuubi. It also means that Nagato has to use his vitality to fight Kyuubi. No one can afford to waste his vitality. How about it? I can meet any conditions you have. As long as you cooperate with Nagato to capture Kyuubi, I can agree to any conditions. After that, Conan looked at Dustless with hope. Her eyes were full of hope. Her low voice even had a little bit of pleading, and there was a faint crystal light gathering in the depths of her eyes. It seems that as long as Dustless refuses, the beautiful woman in front of him will cry. You are full of affection. The corner of his mouth raised a gentle smile. Dustless knew that Conan was sincere, and there was no trace of falsehood. However, this little girl often deliberately found various reasons to trap him. He couldn't just promise her. Are you sure you can meet any conditions? Dustless stared at Conan's delicate body with a smile. He was afraid that Conan didn't know what he meant. The smile on his face deliberately disappeared, and his palms rubbed each other. His eyes moved up and down, and his face was full of wretchedness, and he giggled. You Luo, that tigress, I don't need to tell you. You should know that I'm lacking a considerate maid, the kind of maid. Then, Wu Chen's eyes emitted a wolf-like light. His invasive gaze instantly stripped Xiao Nan naked. His meaning was self-evident. You are shameless. Clenching her silver teeth, Conan's pretty face was pale. Although she had some feelings for Dustless, she was not straightforward to this extent. Especially at the moment when Dustless looked like this, her feelings for him fell to negative. I promise. It's just a joke, don't worry about it. After pondering for a while, Conan was about to agree to Dustless's conditions, but Dustless's calm voice suddenly sounded. The previous wretched smile quickly disappeared, and his face was full of indifference. It was the complete opposite of how he was before. "Are you kidding me?" Conan, who came back to her senses, glared at Dustless. Her delicate fists were tightly clenched, and white sweat seeped out. She looked like she was about to cry. Glancing at Conan, Dustless ignored her ferocious look and whispered, "You should know that Nagato has stepped into the end of his life. Most of his body's organs have stopped, and he is completely holding on," Dustless said. The reason why Nagato was like this was because of the previous use of the Gedo Mazo. Whether it was his soul or the organs of his body were almost collapsed. After forcibly capturing the Kyubi, it may not be long before he dies. Chapter 319. Dustless wasn't lying. Uzumaki was indeed a descendant of the Six Paths, but the burden of using the Rinnegan was still great. Just like Uzumaki Nagato, the burden of using the Rinnegan was huge. Because the Rinnegan didn't belong to him, it consumed several times more energy than Madara. In addition, there were many techniques in the Rinnegan that he couldn't use at all, and he didn't even understand them. I know this, but Yahiko's death was too big a blow to him, and it made him stubborn and persistent in some aspects. Of course, the main reason for all of this is because of me. Letting out a desolate sigh, Conan laughed bitterly at herself. If she hadn't been caught by Hanzo the salamander, none of this would have happened, and Yahiko wouldn't have died. In the end, it's all because of Conan. Dustless didn't agree with Conan's words. Perhaps all the fault lies with Conan. As the saying goes, the dead should be buried in the ground for peace. After the incident, Uzumaki Nagato turned Yahiko into a puppet, showing that his heart was sharply distorted. His previous worldview collapsed in an instant, and his temperament changed greatly. When is Nagato going to do it? Konoha's ninjas aren't easy to deal with. Recalling Konoha's top combat power, Dustless looked serious. Nagato going to catch Uzumaki Naruto alone is not impossible, but it's a dead end. Due to Dustless's pressure, the Kyubi and Uzumaki Naruto have buried the hatchet. Even if he didn't want to, the Kyubi still lent chakra to Naruto for him to use. Moreover, that kid has now learned powerful senjutsu. Nagato can't be his opponent. Therefore, it's not Nagato catching the Kyubi, but Naruto catching him instead. Uzumaki Naruto in the Kyubi mode with senjutsu is absolutely enough to crush Uzumaki Nagato. Rather than saying that Nagato is going to catch the Bijou, it's more straightforward to say that he's going to die. We'll do it in 3 days. Conan's pretty face showed a decisive look, and she didn't talk nonsense. At present, the only one she can trust is Dustless, even if he's unreliable. Moreover, Conan has a good feeling for Dustless, and she doesn't hate him. But then again, suddenly realizing that something was wrong, Dustless secretly frowned, and a hint of doubt inevitably arose in his heart. Dustless asked Xiao Nan calmly, "The members of the organization have recently died in succession, and they seem to be looking for new members. Why do they suddenly want to catch tailed beasts?" His brows tightly knitted together, Dustless's thoughts, but this time it's strange. A few days ago, Pain repeatedly ordered new members news, and Sasuke's new members, but today's is to catch SSTs. S is new S. Uzumaki Nagato should know his own body better than anyone else. Fighting the Kyubi would only make his body collapse faster. There was no reason to sacrifice his life for the Bijou. There must be something fishy going on. This has nothing to do with you, do your job well. It seems that they are talking about something taboo. Conan's face suddenly froze, and coldness surged between her eyebrows, and she shouted at Dustless coldly. Obviously, Conan didn't want Dustless to be involved in this matter. "You have a sharp tongue but a soft heart, Conan." There was a touch of warmth in his heart, but Wu Chen pretended not to know anything. At the same time, his thoughts became more active. Collecting the Bijou is nothing more than to resurrect the Jubi, and therefore, whoever benefits the most will be the most suspicious. Nagato's plan is to temporarily replenish the strength of the Akatsuki. But the current idea is obviously the opposite, and he can't wait to resurrect the Jubi. His eyes narrowed. Dustless's first suspect is naturally Black Zetsu. This old guy knows everything. If anyone wants to resurrect the Jubi, It's undoubtedly Black Zetsu. After all, his mother is Kagaya. On second thought, Dustless shook his head in denial. Heiju was a meticulous person. He could see hundreds of steps ahead. It was impossible for him to have the eye of the moon to implement any new plans. As a result, there would only be flaws and expose him as the behind-the-scenes instigator. Abandoning Black Zetsu doesn't count. There is only one person who wants to resurrect the Jubi, and this person is also very suspicious. Damn Uchiha Obito, there is a limit to what you can do. You are so unscrupulous. Do you even put me in your eyes? In addition to Black Zetsu, only Obito hopes to use the power of the Jubi to release infinite Tsukuyomi to the world, so that he can reunite with his former first love in the world of Noara Rin's Genjutsu. Don't think too much. Just as Dustless's imagination was running wild, a dissatisfied voice exploded in his ears. He looked up and saw Conan frowning. Seeing Dustless come back to his senses, she relaxed. Dustless looked at Conan and then shook his head to indicate that he was fine. You are just a pawn, but your ambition is not small. But you don't seem to know the meaning of a man who is never content. How can a pawn like you touch the Jubi? Wu Chen sneered in disdain as a mocking look appeared in the depths of his eyes. Dust still clearly remembers that after the resurrection of the Jubi, Madara and Obito had an opinion analysis. Obito wanted to become a Jinchuriki and release the infinite Tsukuyomi, the strongest genjutsu in the world. His purpose was extremely simple. He wanted to meet Noara Rin in the world of genjutsu. Your ambition is not small, but it's a pity that your teeth are too fragile. You don't have the strength to bite the Jubi. The contemptuous smile disappeared in a flash, and Dustless recovered his calm demeanor. Among Madara, Obito, and Dustless, Obito was the most powerless, but he was the most ambitious one. Naturally, Obito was the first target to be killed by Dustless and Madara. Chapter 320. 3 days later, the spring was long, and everything was recovering, showing signs of prosperity. Dustless also quickly let go of Obito's matter and didn't take it to heart. In short, Obito was originally a clown-like existence, but one of the chess pieces that Madara used to contain himself, and people who can be defeated by the mouth of Madara have always been the object of Dustless's contempt. Even if Obito has the essence of being a hero, Dustless still has a contemptuous attitude towards him. Compared to a peerless powerhouse like Madara, Obito is just a grain of sand on the edge of the waves, not worth mentioning. On the top of the mountain, black shadows were reflected on the ground. Looking up, he saw 3 black figures standing here, overlooking the void in the distance, with different expressions. It's worthy of being the most fertile village in the continent. Even if there is no human habitation, it's still a rare fertile land. Looking at the picturesque Xanadu below, Wu Chen sighed with emotion. Compared to the country of rain, the land in front of him was simply heaven on earth, a Xanadu where immortals were free and unfettered. No wonder other ninja villages are jealous of Konoha. Once upon a time, the land here didn't belong to the land of fire. Pain's eyes looked indifferently at the void in the distance. His purple pupils always maintained indifference, and his body floated with cold air, giving a creepy feeling. The fertile land of the Land of Fire today was only snatched by Hashirama and Madara in the past. Indeed. Dustless nodded in agreement. The land in front of him was also plundered, and the initiators were Hashirama and Madara. These two are absolutely invincible when they join forces. After all, there was no ninja village in the era they lived in. Madara and Hashirama just relied on their powerful strength to draw the land into a village. The strong flower of Konoha is about to wither, and the light of God will quickly catch the Kyuubi. Pain seemed to think of something, and the words on the tip of his tongue stopped abruptly. Only then did he realize that Dustless was also present. Calling himself a god in front of someone stronger than himself, this joke is not funny at all. Leave that 9-tailed brat to me. Remembering Nagato's dying body and Conan's request, Dustless said seriously. Naruto's misfortune was also a blessing in disguise. Because the Akatsuki was unscrupulous in capturing Bijou, Kyuubi was also thinking for his own sake. Now that he learned Mount Myaboku's Sage Mode, his strength skyrocketed. The current Uzumaki Nagato was no match for him. I'll take care of 9 tails. A ripple appeared in Samsara's eyes. Pain said indifferently. His voice was very soft, but there was no room for doubt. Dustless frowned, displeasure flashing in his eyes. Naruto Uzumaki was no longer the kid who didn't understand the world. His strength improved by leaps and bounds. However, Nagato was still the Nagato of the past, and he was infected with a hidden disease. The outcome was obvious. That Tanuki brat has already. Just as he was about to persuade Nagato to give up the idea of facing Kyuubi alone, he suddenly felt cold in his palm. He was grabbed by a soft little hand. Turning his head, he saw Konan. Her eyes flashed with a different color, indicating Dustless not to say more. Seeing this, Dustless's frowning brows loosened, and he no longer dissuaded Nagato. The organization's language disappeared. He stood silently on the top of the mountain, overlooking the peaceful village in the distance. Whoosh! Several black shadows swept out one after another, jumped off the cliff, fell into the dense forest, and galloped straight toward the village ahead. All of them were wearing black trench coats embroidered with red clouds. It was the other 5 in Pain's 6 paths. After staring at Konan for a moment, Pain's eyes flashed with a complicated look. After immediately looking at Dustless, he took a deep breath and said in a deep voice, "Dustless, take care of Konan." Whoosh! After that, without waiting for Dustless and Konan to react, Pain's body roared out like a cannonball and disappeared in a flash. When they realized that he had left, he had already disappeared. They could only vaguely see a small black dot gradually disappearing. Dustless frowned slightly, and his heart was full of doubts. In a trance just now, he actually saw Pain's expression of facing death. Could it be that this guy is deliberately going to die? His eyes widened, looking directly at the small black dot that had disappeared. Dustless secretly murmured. From Pain's tone, Dustless heard an unprecedented relief. Is it an illusion? Or does he really intend to die by himself? It should be impossible. His dream of peace has not been completed. There is no reason to choose to embark on a path of no return. Dustless whispered in a low voice. Nagato was the kind of person who adhered to his beliefs very much. The great cause of peace had not been completed. It was impossible for him to suddenly see through everything in the world and die. Nagato. Silently watching Pain's back, Konan's beautiful and clear eyes lost their color, and they were abnormally dim. Her eyes were faintly filled with some tears. The atmosphere suddenly became sad. Nagato may be planning to end things with Uzumaki Naruto. With a complicated sigh, Dustless said faintly. His tone was neither sad nor happy. He just hoped that Nagato would not be instigated by Naruto, and he didn't expect him to catch the Kyuubi. Uchiha Obito is still calculating. He obviously has the Kyuubi-in attribute chakra in his hands, but he still instigated Nagato to attack Konoha. His goal should be the Gedo Mazo and the bijou in his hands. Recalling what had happened, Dustless secretly sneered. Obito, this kid, had a good plan. He deliberately tricked Uzumaki Nagato to capture the bijou. If Nagato died, the Gedo Mazo and the bijou in his hands would naturally become Obito's meal. Controlling the Gedo Mazo and the 6 bijou, he was definitely an invincible existence. Dustless's dry lips suddenly curled into a mocking arc. His expression was cold. Man proposes, God disposes. Obito was the one who trapped himself in a cocoon. Chapter 321. In the serene and quiet village, there was an endless stream of people. As the village with the largest population in the 5 major countries, Konoha was always a bustling scene no matter the time. The bright afterglow of the setting sun set off Konoha, and the entire village was bathed in a golden torrent, flashing and dazzling. Sure enough, it's a rotten village. Even God thinks that you're hopeless. Pain, who easily sneaked into Konoha, faintly stared at the village covered in a golden coat, and a cold mist blew out from the corner of his mouth. In his view, this scene was mourning the passing of Konoha. God is mourning the last afterglow of Konoha. The Rinnegan rippled, and an irresistible repulsive force broke out of Pain's body. Tendo Pain calmed down, and chakra began to roll violently. Shinra Tensei. The strong repulsive force was like a giant rock falling into the sea, splashing monstrous ripples, and the scattered force pulled the entire Konoha into the whirlpool, and a huge pit appeared on the ground. Although the scale and power were not as powerful as Shinra Tensei, after a long time of condensing a large amount of chakra, it was still powerful, and it caused unforgettable damage to the ground. Such a large range of movement naturally attracted the attention of Konoha's ninjas, and a large number of shadows rushed to the place where chakra erupted like ants smelling syrup. I wanted to help him attract the attention of Konoha's ninjas, but it seems that I'm superfluous. Staring at pain above Konoha, Dustless didn't know whether to laugh or cry. He originally wanted to attract the attention of Konoha's ninjas and reduce Pain's burden, but he didn't expect Nagato to be so high-profile. Letting out a sigh, Dustless was about to withdraw and leave when an uninvited guest immediately arrived. Danzo, after so many years, you haven't aged at all, you're still very young. Leisurely looking back, Dustless saw an old acquaintance, the leader of the Root clan, Shimura Danzo. It's worth mentioning that Shimura Danzo hasn't changed much since many years ago, and he still looked full of energy. Obviously, he was an old antique from the same era as Hokage, but his spiritual and physical strength were much more vigorous than Hokage. As expected, it's Akatsuki again. A group of damned bastards, and you! The half-naked eye stared at Dustless. His piercing gaze was enough to put people to death by 1,000 cuts. His eyes flashed with resentment, and he said with hatred, "That old fool Yuan Fei is really not the material to be Hokage. If it were me, your evil family would never see the next day's sun." Danzo has repeatedly advocated the destruction of the Uchiha clan, but the late Sandaime Hokage has been dragging his feet. If he had taken advantage of the fact that Dustless and Itachi were not even born, the Uchiha clan would not have ended up like this. You are right, if you were Hokage, maybe the Uchiha would have already collapsed. Dustless nodded in agreement. With Danzo's cold personality, maybe he will really eradicate the Uchiha in advance. Looking at Danzo indifferently, Dustless's tone suddenly changed as he mocked. But everything has two sides. If you became Hokage in advance, Konoha's ninja village might have already disappeared with the wind. Danzo is a radical, or rather, he advocates war. If he became Hokage, the Shinobi World War may not be as simple as 3 times. Konoha will also be dragged into the abyss by him. Bastard, you are courting death. Danzo, who didn't like the Uchiha, heard Dustless's ridicule and became angry. His eyes were instantly swallowed by dense blood vessels, and his body began to become restless. If it weren't for the fact that he was afraid of Dustless's strength, with his temper, he would have definitely killed him on the spot. There may be people in the world who can kill me, but it is definitely not you. With a raised face, Danzo didn't hide his sarcasm. Danzo's protest was boring and boring. Humph, half of the Kyuubi's chakra has already been taken away by you, and now you have come back. Konoha is not a place where an evil person like you can casually come. Your darkness will dye Konoha in your own color. After saying that, Danzo stared at Dustless with murderous intent, and secretly gathered chakra in his mouth. As long as Dustless shows a flaw, he will not hesitate to deal a fatal blow. What a joke! I am an evil person, yes, but you are like a mouse hiding in the darkness. What qualifications do you have to say that? And there is no place in this world that I can't go if I don't come. No one can stop me. With a sneer on his face, Dustless sneered and condensed a golden sword in his hand. Repent in hell, you worm in the guise of a demon. There was a frosty expression on his face as faint ripples appeared in the air. He raised his head and saw the heavenly sword of gathering clouds in Wu Chen's hand moving effortlessly. A huge slash whizzed out. It easily cut Shimura Danzo into pieces. Weak! Dustless didn't even look at Shimura Danzo's body, he directly turned around and walked away. A woo! Suddenly, a deafening roar burst out, and the clouds in the void were directly destroyed by this destructive force. The domineering and powerful chakra turned into an endless impact, indicating its power. A golden luster enveloped the entire void. The people close to Jiraiya seemed to have a tacit understanding with the beast. Staring at the tall figure in the distance, Dustless sighed. It was extremely difficult to ignore his majestic body, and the 9 beautiful tails swayed with the wind. The whole body was completely condensed of golden chakra, and Uzumaki Naruto was clearly seen in the huge body. His small face was full of confidence, and he was full of confidence. Naruto calmly stared at Pain floating in the sky, especially the black trench coat embroidered with red clouds, which outlined the painful memories in Naruto's heart. Similar to Sasuke, the demonic face suddenly appeared in Naruto's mind, and Naruto's smile suddenly froze. He seemed to see that annoying face looking at him with indifference and disdain, and his killing intent exploded. Uchiha Dustless, I will never let you go. Chapter 322. The demonic luster enveloped Konoha, and Kyuubi was no longer as evil as before. His huge eyes stared at the shadow in the sky, and he opened his mouth and spat out a small black energy ball. Pain's mouth flashed with contempt when he saw this. He hugged the sky with both hands, and the invisible energy was repelled from his body. Shinra Tensei! Boom! Boom! The dark small Bijudama was easily bounced off, and it exploded in the sky, burning with black smoke. You want to break through Shinra Tensei with such a fragile Bijudama? You're dreaming. Rina's eyes were filled with cold light. Pain stared at the golden body with murderous intent. This ugly fox boy dared to underestimate him. Although the previous Bijudama contained a large amount of chakra, its power was not as good as Ichibi's Bijudama. It's not bad. Uzumaki Naruto, who was wrapped in golden light, grinned and was immediately filled with murderous intent. The dark chakra in his palm rolled, and a high-density energy ball was thrown out. The rotating energy ball swallowed the hurricane, and its power was obviously much stronger than the previous Bijudama. This kid is really blessed by God, Dustless said with jealousy in his tone, and he couldn't wait to slap himself. When they caught the Ichibi, Naruto and Kyuubi had to come together in the face of absolute strength, and they had to abandon their past grievances, which led to their perfect cooperation now. It's better to find a chance to kill him. Narrowing his eyes, Dustless secretly decided. This kid's growth can't be estimated by common sense. There's nothing wrong with erasing such uncertainty as early as possible. While Dustless pondered, the Bijudama condensed in Uzumaki Naruto's hand approached Pain. Shinra Tensei. Pain repeated the same trick, and the repulsive force opened a perfect 360-degree defense, and his expression was calm. Boom! The invisible repulsive force turned into a hard absolute defense, and the dark Bijudama slammed into the repulsive force, splashing a circle of ripples, and then it was successfully stopped, unable to touch Pain. Shinra Tensei is really a perfect defensive move. No matter what technique it is, it can't break through its defense dash. Ka ka ka. The smile at the corner of his mouth froze, and his pupils dilated. Shinra Tensei's perfect defense began to crack, and a shattering sound came from it like a mirror. As he raised his head, the black Bijudama directly swallowed him whole. Boom boom boom. Following the explosion, a blazing ball of fire swept across the void. Black smoke burned more than 100 feet high. Suddenly, the horizon darkened. Even the Hokage would not be spared from such an explosion. Your companions might have been killed. A sinister voice came from behind. His eyes emitted a green light, like a poisonous snake, hissing. Dustless didn't even turn his head when he heard the words. He quietly looked at the fire and said calmly, "He is a man with Rinnegan. It's not right to kill him so easily." But then again, looking back, his eyes locked on the person who spoke and whispered, "You are an outsider, yet you know Izanagi, a technique that some people in the Uchiha clan don't know. Izanagi is one of the forbidden techniques of the Uchiha clan. It can instantly turn all the disadvantages of the caster, including death, into a dream, and turn all the advantages of the attacker into reality. It is an ultimate genjutsu that can freely control the boundary between reality and dream." So many Sharingans. It seems that all the Sharingans that were not taken away after the destruction of the Uchiha clan fell into your hands. There were several scarlet 3-tomo Sharingans on Danzo's arm. His arm was pale white, obviously different from the skin color of a normal person, containing a majestic vitality. Ultimate genjutsu? What a joke, so what? An outsider can still control it. As if he heard the most ridiculous joke, Shimura Danzo sneered disdainfully, and his tone was filled with endless pride. As an outsider, he could control some ultimate genjutsu that even the Uchiha clan didn't know. For a certain period of time, Danzo will be immortal. A lot of nonsense. What do you want to say? A few minutes will pass in a blink of an eye. What can you do? How many times can you resurrect? How many times can I kill you? After saying that, Dustless's body flashed with a bright light, and he rushed out. At the moment when he was close to Shimura Danzo, the light beam instantly condensed, and Dustless's body instantly condensed, and at the same time, the sword in his hand also came down. Pucci! Shimura Danzo's head was directly separated from his body, and it was not difficult to see from his eyes that he didn't even have time to react before he was killed on the spot. It wasn't that Danzo was too slow, but Dustless's reaction was too fast. Dust release. Detachment of the original world jutsu. A white transparent enchantment suddenly appeared and covered Dustless, and a round ball floated in front of Dustless. The enchantment was as thin as a cicada's wing, but it was extremely hard and couldn't be broken. Dustless frowned, and there was a puzzled expression on his face. He leisurely looked back and saw a short old man floating in the sky. It was the Tsuchikage of the rock village, Anoki. There's no need to be so confused. The 5 major countries are secretly dealing with the Akatsuki, so naturally, the Kage of each village will gather once, and they can't let you continue to be so lawless, and you are just so unlucky to walk into the trap. The Kage of the other 4 major countries are all in Konoha. Seeing Dustless's puzzlement, Anoki coldly explained, and at the same time, the other 4 Kage also came into view, and they stared at Dustless with murderous intent. This is interesting. A smile appeared on his face. He didn't expect that the 5 Kage would gather in advance, and the location turned out to be Konoha. Wu Chen's gaze returned to normal. His calm voice resounded. His eyes were sharp, and his whole body was emitting an extremely overbearing sense of oppression. I have said before, in this world, there is no place that I can't come. Chapter 323. At the same time, Shimura Danzo, who was killed by Dustless on the spot, once again recovered. Boom. 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 The dust escape that bound Dustless had obviously reached its limit. It swept up a dazzling white brilliance and immediately exploded with a bang. The scattered air waves swallowed and swept up the earth, leaving behind an unforgettable deep pit. Dust filled the sky, sand and stones flew, but there was no life in the smoke. Anoki's eyes were full of hope. He thought that he could kill Dustless. After all, no one has been attacked by the dust release and still be intact. Unfortunately, Anoki was destined to be disappointed. Rude and direct old man, you haven't changed at all. A frivolous voice came from the dust, mocking Anoki. He didn't need to look to know that Dustless, who was attacked by the dust release, was safe and sound. You damned old bastard! How dare you blaspheme my grandfather? Her eyes suddenly turned and stared at Danzo's arm full of Sharingan. Tsunade's anger rose in her heart, and she clenched her fists tightly. She didn't even try to hide her killing intent. Her most respected grandfather's body was blasphemed. How could Tsunade not be angry? 5th Hokage-sama, although I sympathize with your heart, please understand your position. Other trivial matters can be dealt with later. The 4th Raikage was straightforward, although he was also very disdainful of Danzo. The enemy at the moment was Dustless, not Danzo, so everything can be dealt with later. His strong body stared at Dustless. The 4th Raikage didn't hide his killing intent. It was because Dustless forcibly extracted his brother Killer Bee's bijou that Killer Bee died. This was the eternal pain of the Raikage, an irreparable pain, and he lived in the shadow of hatred almost every day and night. I naturally know this, you don't need to say more. Tsunade also chose to be indifferent. She and the Raikage were both at the same level, and there was no distinction between the two of them. If they had to talk about seniority, Tsunade was slightly older than the 4th Raikage. But now this kid was scolding her, whether in her own position or in Konoha's position, Tsunade can't be weak. Tsunade's complex expression disappeared, and she stared at Dustless with murderous intent. Anoki and Gaara also stared at Dustless with their teeth clenched. The hatred between them was as deep as the sea, and there was no room for turning back. On the contrary, Terumi Mei had a smile on her face as her eyes flashed with a strange luster. Mizukage-sama, now it's time for the 5 villages to fight the enemy together. Please pay attention to your position. Anoki's old face collapsed. Mei's smile made him particularly depressed. Now is the time to fight against the enemy together. Not a marriage agency for you to choose a husband for you. Both the Raikage and the Kazekage frowned. These 2 women used to have a connection with Dustless, and only God knows whether they are reliable or not. Let's deal with this Uchiha Dustless guy first. His existence is the fundamental source of the world's turmoil. After he is eliminated, the so-called Akatsuki will also collapse. The red-haired boy Gaara said. He also had a deep hatred with Dustless. Even if it was only indirect, killing Dustless was not enough to calm the anger in his heart. Dustless, this is the last time I ask you. Taking a deep breath, Tsunade's eyes stared at Dustless, and her voice was heavy and hoarse as she asked, as long as you surrender. Ignorant. Dustless glanced at Tsunade faintly, and directly ignored her. The golden light surged at his fingertips and gathered into a round light ball. The dazzling light made people unable to open their eyes. Facing the 5 Kage, a large number of golden light balls swarmed out. Whoosh! The golden light balls were enough to penetrate the mountain, and countless sharp lights flashed. The only thing they could do was to defend. Even Raikage, who was a speed maniac, was choking. If he pretended to be hit, he would only be hit into a sieve. Tsunade's eyes flashed with despair, and her bright eyes dimmed. It was not because of the light balls in front of her. She was not afraid of death, but because Dustless mercilessly refused her kindness. This heartless man. How could he be so ruthless? I was wrong about him. Terumi Mei's mouth twitched fiercely, and she cursed Dustless thousands of times. The two obviously had a cooperative relationship, but now Dustless obviously didn't have the slightest mercy. Even if it was an act, it was too real. Don't underestimate the power of Kage. He suddenly raised his hands, and a huge sand-shaped solid rose from the ground, condensed and shrank, and turned into a solid defense. It was hundreds of feet long, and separated the 5 Kage from the oncoming light balls. Bang! 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 Without exception, the golden light balls all hit the sand-made defensive wall, leaving countless small round holes, but they couldn't break the wall. I haven't seen you for a few years, and your strength has increased. Seeing this, Dustless grinned and blew out cold air from his mouth. With a strange look, chakra began to surge out of his body. When he was about to give the enemy a fatal blow, the ground under his feet sank deep. Crack! 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 The ground under his feet strangely sank more than 10 meters deep, and the surrounding soil was sealed. There was only a passage above. Whoosh! The sound of torrential water suddenly came, and judging from the flow of the water, it was quite turbulent. Looking up, it was a turbulent wave, and it almost instantly filled the square pit, turning it into a sea. They are quite cooperative. Seeing this scene, Dustless slightly nodded, showing an interested expression. He was quite looking forward to the next action of the 5 Kage. The square pit has limited the space of movement, and a large number of water gushed in. Any creature in the pit will be affected by the resistance of the water flow, and Dustless's speed will be affected. At least the 5 Kage thought so. Chapter 324. The wide pit was filled with water in the blink of an eye. Now that light-speed bastard should be restricted, right? Mei looked down at Dustless, who was motionless in the sea. She frowned slightly and immediately licked her thin lips, showing a puzzled look. She was very curious about how Dustless avoided the joint attack of the 5 Kage. The situation that came into view was quite strange. All around them were water sources with rapids, and from beginning to end, they couldn't get close to Wu Chen in the slightest. With him as the center, a vacuum zone isolated everything was formed. In particular, Dustless's expression was particularly hateful, and he was looking forward to the clown's performance. Mei couldn't help but be angry. No matter how much you despise others, there should be a limit. Kazekage-sama. The hot-tempered Raikage couldn't hold back his temper and urged Gaara. His words revealed a monstrous killing intent, as if he couldn't wait to tear Dustless into pieces. Killer Bee fell in the hands of Dustless, and he wanted to pay with blood. No problem. With endless coldness in his eyes, Gaara didn't hesitate at all. The powerful and boundless chakra in his body began to erupt, and the dead sand around him seemed to be summoned by the wind god and rushed over from all directions. However, it didn't take long for Gaara's face to be covered with sweat. The weight of the sand was not light, and it was extremely laborious to control. Upon seeing this, Inoki suddenly stepped forward and placed his calloused hands on Gaara's back. Earth release, lightweight rock technique. Gaara, who was controlling the heavy sand, suddenly relaxed. He felt that his body was much lighter, and the weight of the sand was only 1% of the original. There was no doubt that it was Inoki's masterpiece. Gaara immediately turned his head and gave Inoki a grateful look, and immediately worked harder to control the sparkling sand. His proficiency had obviously improved a lot compared to before. This old man is finally doing something that a human should do. His rough eyes swept across Inoki's body, and the fourth Raikage's disgust for Inoki eased. After all, his father, the third Raikage, died under the plot of the rock village. Seeing that Inoki wanted to repent, the dissatisfaction in the fourth Raikage's heart subsided. Take this. With Gaara's roar, all the heavy gravel swarmed into the deep pit filled with water, turning it as sticky as paste. The resistance became even greater, making it difficult to move. In this sealed space I want to see how you can move at the speed of light. The fourth Raikage smiled ferociously. Dustless's space had been completely suppressed, and there were only a few places where he could move at the speed of light. Don't underestimate him. After all, he's a legendary figure on the same level as Uchiha Madara and Hashirama Senju. Inoki was cautious and meticulous. Although Dustless seemed to be powerless at this time, he was like a livestock in a cage waiting to be slaughtered. In the past, he had several confrontations with Dustless. He thought that he would win, but he was slapped in the face by Dustless. And it was the kind of slap that was extremely loud. I naturally know this, and it's up to me to do it. A loud voice burst out, and the Raikage's body was covered with chakra, and the harsh roar made people's scalp numb. This state is so strong. Mei and Tsunade looked at each other, and they could see the shock in each other's eyes. The Raikage was extremely powerful at this time. The surface of his strong bronze skin was covered with dark blue chakra, and the sharp thunder could be heard. The dark blue chakra was like an unbreakable shield. Sure enough, it's not simple. It's worthy of being the Raikage who is famous for his taijutsu. He can control the power of thunder and lightning, and use chakra and lightning to reach the level of physical activation. All aspects of the body's functions are significantly improved. It's not simple. Tsunade, who knew medical ninjutsu, could see that the Raikage's move was extraordinary. It stimulated the body to the limit in all aspects of physical fitness. An ordinary human body facing the violent stimulation of chakra would probably bleed to death on the spot. Under the gaze of the other four Kage, the Raikage put his arm into the deep pit of water and sand. No wonder he's the leader of the village, he really can't be underestimated. Under the deep pit, Wuxia held his hands in front of him, and his body was covered with golden evil chakra, which was also a substantialized existence, and the golden sand that wanted to erode him was excluded. After quietly observing for a while, Dustless nodded and showed a look of appreciation. First, he used earth release to restrict my movement, then he used water release to bury me alive. At the same time, he used water to seal the entire space, so I can't move at the speed of light, completely restricting my movement. Next, he used the sand that contains metal to strengthen the defense, but it seems that it's not over yet, there should be more. After carefully observing the surroundings for a moment, Dustless was cautious. These various moves were obviously the attacks of 3 of the 5 Kage, but there were still 2 Kage-level powerhouses who haven't made a move yet. Pa, pa, pa. Outside of the evil golden chakra, a sudden flash of silver light flashed. Dustless was slightly stunned, and the originally dark world suddenly lit up. This is thunder and lightning, so that's how it is. Looking at the bright world in front of him, Dustless's eyes flashed as if he just woke up from a dream. With the dazzling light of the thunder and lightning, he could clearly see countless golden particles floating in the mud formed by the water and sand, and looking at it, there were more than 10 million of them. The water contains all kinds of minerals, and it's already conductive, and now there are countless metals in the sand, so the water droplets will form a huge lightning net. There's no place for me to hide. Although Dustless was curious about how the 5 Kage could cooperate so well, he couldn't help but sneer. Chapter 325. Feeling the violent thunder and lightning all around, ripples appeared in Kuroto's dark eyes. He did not expect the so-called 5 Kages to be so extraordinary. If they were to work together, they could actually exert a superdimensional combat power. Ka. When Dustless was thinking about it, the golden materialized chakra that was resisting the erosion let out a sorrowful cry. There was a burst of ka, similar to the sound of glass shattering, which immediately attracted Dustless's attention. Looking up, what came into view was the golden skeleton with slight cracks. It was like the ribs of a human body, tightly protecting Dustless. This unassuming skeleton was extremely strong, harder than steel. Dustless relied on this to resist the impact of the water, but now there were cracks. It was enough to prove that the change in quality after using several ninjutsu was completely estimated by multiples. It really can't be underestimated. But maybe you don't understand. Although speed is my strength, compared to this simple escape technique, absolute destruction is my specialty. Dustless whispered to himself. At the same time, high-density chakra began to erupt violently. The rich golden chakra was spotless, light and clean. It poured into the skeleton that was about to collapse and was absorbed. In just a blink of an eye, the collapsed and decomposed skeleton gathered and condensed again. It was shining with a new luster, reborn, and its strength and physique were both expanding. Its size was constantly increasing, like a hungry and thirsty baby, greedily absorbing the chakra in Dustless's body, strengthening its own body formed by chakra. Looking up, one could see an extremely huge skeleton. Its appearance and demeanor were the same as an enlarged version of a human. The golden giant's demeanor was terrifying and oppressive. The golden light from its body was like 1,000,000 degrees high temperature. In an instant, the surging sea in the deep pit evaporated into nothingness. The sand particles in the pit were directly burned into a fiery red color, and everything that could be dissolved was dissolved. What the hell is that? Why is it so evil? The faces of the villagers standing beside the deep pit were filled with fear. They looked at the giant golden head down below in shock. Through the giant body, they could easily feel the extraordinariness of that ancient aura. That spirit of daring to fight against the heavens and earth had deeply moved them. The ferocious Tengu armor challenged everyone's bottom line. That's Dustless's Kensusanoo dodge. Suddenly recalling the accident in the Hokage's office, Tsunade warned loudly. She tensed up and stared at the towering body in horror. When she first saw Dustless's Kensusanoo, it was just a small shape, but now it has become a behemoth. So, the huge body suddenly stomped on the ground, and the golden body jumped out of the deep pit, and the body that weighed countless tons landed on the ground. Boom, boom, boom. The whole earth burst open like a piece of paper. The violent vibration was like a meteorite outside the universe hitting the earth, and the earth trembled fiercely. Cracks appeared on the ground within a radius of tens of miles. The 30 to 40 meters tall body went straight into the sky, with 2 slender zanpakuto on its waist. It had 2 heads and 4 arms, and its crimson eyes flickered with the afterglow of a demon. The size of Kensusanoo could be determined according to the will of the caster, that is, big or small, and it could become any position. Everything was determined by the will of the caster. Dustless was too lazy to use the complete Kensusanoo to deal with them. Although the 30 to 40 meters tall Kensusanoo in front of him was still extremely terrifying, it was indeed not Dustless's complete body. What is this? What is this? Gaara choked and said numbly. It took all his strength to say these words. After he finished speaking, he was listless as if his soul had been sucked away. Sure enough, it's that kind of powerful jutsu. Anoki smiled bitterly. Kensusanoo's height was as high as the sky, and the power of the whole body was like a war god from ancient times. Its body contained invincible power. Anoki and the second Tsuchikage had experienced the power of Kensusanoo, and his understanding was naturally incomparable. This jutsu was completely in the realm of gods, and it could be called an invincible jutsu. I once heard my grandfather say that this is the Kansusanoo of the Uchiha family. Dustless used it in the past, but the Kansusanoo at that time was obviously different from the one in front of us. I thought my grandfather was talking about myths, but now it seems... Speaking of this, Tsunade clenched her teeth and was silent. If it was really as Hashirama once described, this legendary Kensusanoo could only be dealt with by a god. Don't be scared by him, stand up, Kage. Anoki, who was floating in the sky, raised his arms and shouted, as if he was injected with chicken blood. His face was flushed and said, all jutsu have weaknesses that are unknown to people. This unprecedented lineup of 5 Kage joining forces has never appeared before. We have a chance of winning. That's reasonable. In addition to Terumi Mei's worried look, Gaara, Fourth Raikage, and Tsunade all agreed with Anoki's statement. Dustless was powerful, but the 5 Kage joining forces was unprecedented. Especially the main battlefield was in Konoha's ninja village, and they completely had the advantage of location and manpower. I'm not interested in playing anymore. Anyway, this is a boring war to begin with. Shaking his head, Dustless looked at the 5 Kage expressionlessly. He was originally responsible for the task of restraining them, to create time for Pain to catch QB. Boom! In the distance, there was another violent roar, and the tide of overbearing airwaves spread in all directions, swallowing all things in the world. They could clearly see a small black dot flying out. Looking closely, it was Uzumaki Nagato. Your companions don't seem to be able to do it, but Naruto is surprisingly strong. Gaara breathed a sigh of relief. After he and Naruto turned from enemies to friends, the two became close friends. Seeing the members of the Akatsuki being beaten and suppressed, he felt indescribable joy in his heart. Idiot, you will know the horror of Rinnegan soon. Chapter 326. The power of Rinnegan is unparalleled. It can easily create and destroy the world. The powerful sealing technique is the characteristic of Rinnegan. Some amazing worldly abilities are unheard of and unseen. Even if Nagato was weak, he wouldn't be easily defeated without a sound. Rinnegan wasn't just for show. Instead of worrying about others, it's better to worry about my own situation. You are still lambs waiting to be slaughtered. Dustless's cold eyes swept past the 5 Kage, and he smiled coldly. The cold air from his mouth could freeze time and space, and crystal snowflakes appeared in the flowing air. Ken Susanoo of the Uchiha family. It said that if you see him, you will definitely die. Sure enough, this technique can only be dealt with by the legendary god of ninja, Hashirama Senju. The fourth Raikage's strong body trembled slightly as he said unwillingly. It's important for people to have self-knowledge. The fourth generation Raikage can recognize the gap between them. Wu Chen was very surprised. He thought that this muscular man would fight with him, but he didn't expect him to be calm. It seems that he's the same kind of man as Jiraiya. I can't be careless. Seeing this, Wu Chen couldn't help but sigh. None of these Kage were easy to deal with. Whether it was Inoki, Gaara, Tsunade, Terumi Mei, or the fourth Raikage, they all had their own characteristics. The Raikage looked like a muscular man, but in fact, he was careless. If he was really reckless, he wouldn't be able to become the commander of the ninja allied forces. The children's game time is over. Dustless's voice just fell. Ken Susanoo's katana of light came out of its sheath, and the slender golden light enveloped the earth. Even if he didn't wield his sword to destroy the world, the 5 Kage were extremely uneasy. A height of tens of meters was no longer an existence that humans could deal with. Even Inoki, who had a strong will, couldn't deal with it. Is this bastard really going to kill me too? Terumi Mei's pretty face was ashen. She tried her best to remain calm. Suddenly, she remembered the covenant between her and Dustless in the past. Her pale lips raised a bitter smile. Until now, Mei hasn't received any news about Nibi's Jinchuriki. I don't think so. He wouldn't be so reckless. Shaking her head, Terumi Mei decisively denied the thought in her heart. Her eyes became firm again. Dustless and her had no conflict of interest. They even had a common purpose in some aspects. His dispirited mood was swept away. His eyes shone brightly as he stared at the golden giant that was tens of meters tall. He took this as a test of his tolerance. Under everyone's surprised gaze, Ken Susanoo raised his arm high, and the katana in his hand swept in the direction of Mei and the others. So, there was a ripple in the air, and a golden light shot out like a hurricane. Looking up, they saw a huge golden light that covered the sky and went straight toward Mei and the other 5 Kage. Boom, boom, boom. The golden light along the way was like the incarnation of the law of destruction, annihilating all matter in contact with it, regardless of whether it existed or not. In the blink of an eye, they vanished into thin air. There wasn't even a trace of their existence. Their fate was too horrible to bear. As far as the eye could see, a long and narrow crack had suddenly appeared on the ground that was covered in scars. It was boundless, and it was practically impossible to see the end. It was as if an enraged god had torn it apart, and it was extremely horrifying. It's over. It's boring. Dustless sighed regretfully. His face was filled with disappointment. He originally thought that the 5 Kage could make him take them seriously for once, but he didn't expect them to be so weak. No wonder Uchiha Madara could easily kill them later. Over. Don't underestimate Shadow's power. Even if you get carried away, you should know when to stop. Suddenly, a steady and powerful roar resounded through the sky, accompanied by a strong chakra wave. The ground began to sink, especially the ground under the feet of dustless Kansusanoo collapsed in an instant, and he fell into a deep pit. Earth release again. This little old man is really difficult to deal with. Wu Chen, who was in the deep pit, stared at the blue sky and couldn't help but frown. He could clearly see a faintly discernible black spot at the focal point of his line of sight. It was the Tsuchikage Inoki. This time, Inoki obviously used all his strength, aiming at Dustless's direction, and the silent chakra in his body began to surge. Dust release. Boundary stripping technique. A white halo shone between his hands, and as Inoki's voice fell, Kansusanoo was suddenly sealed by this transparent white barrier. Inoki, this old man is really desperate, and full of energy. Looking around and seeing this tough barrier, Dustless showed a playful smile. He didn't care that Kansusanoo was eroded by the dust release, and his expression was natural and leisurely. But what's the use of this? A contemptuous smile appeared on the corner of his mouth, and his scarlet eyes shot out evil eye power. The power in his eyes began to rage, and the boundless eye power seemed to be able to distort time and space, and the space rippled faintly. The dust release, tailor-made for Kansusanoo, began to show small white cracks. How is this possible? Floating in the sky, Inoki, who was gasping for breath, widened his eyes and fixed his eyes on the transparent dust release. In the dark, he seemed to hear a cracking sound. Are you kidding me? Is he going to grow bigger? Even with Inoki's calmness, he was shocked. As the saying goes, there is a limit to everything. The golden giant in front of him didn't even have a limit. As long as there was enough chakra, it seemed that he could grow without limit. Bang bang bang. Sure enough, with the help of Dustless's chakra, Kansusanoo's body grew bigger again, and the indestructible dust release collapsed instantly. Like a broken mirror, it was extremely fragile. Boom boom boom. With another slash, the deep pit that Kansusanoo was suddenly torn apart, and the dust in the sky scattered like raindrops. The great body was inevitably exposed to the air. Gulp. A choking sound was heard, and the 5 Kages, including Inoki, looked at the huge golden giant in astonishment. Looking at the big scarlet eyes, there was a fear that came from the depths of their souls. It went against the norm to grow taller by dozens of meters. It seems that Bao made the right bet. Mei smiled with joy. Fortunately, she was able to reach an agreement with Dustless in advance. In this way, the safety of the Mist Village was guaranteed. Otherwise, Mei's face would be the same as the other 4 Kages, and her face would also be ashen. This abnormal power is comparable to Uchiha Madara. Inoki's face was heavy, and his hunched back seemed to be carrying a boulder of thousands of pounds, making him breathless. Throughout the world, Inoki was the only one who experienced the horror of Uchiha Madara. But it's not impossible. Inoki's eyes flashed, and in his heart, he put Dustless on the same level as Uchiha Madara. As long as they gather all the power of the 5 major countries, defeating Dustless shouldn't be difficult. When the number reaches a certain level, it can change the whole world. Everyone, the current situation is urgent. The 5 major countries should form a ninja allied forces and jointly suppress the enemy. Inoki's body fell to the ground, and he suggested to the other 4 Kages. Since the quality was not good, they could only rely on the number of people to exhaust the enemy. The enemy that Inoki mentioned was naturally Dustless and the Akatsuki. The Sand Village has no opinion, and I think the daimyo should not be willing to be someone else's puppet. He will agree to this alliance. So, I agree to form a ninja allied forces immediately. Gaara agreed without hesitation. Those high and mighty big names did not want to become puppet-like existences. They had to sit on their bottomless seats and live freely. Gaara was 100% sure that the daimyo would agree with this proposal, unless they wanted to live like puppets in the future. Otherwise, they would definitely live. I also agree, Killer Bee's death must be paid with blood. Yondaime Reikage gnashed his teeth and said hatefully. His hatred towards the Akatsuki organization, or rather towards Wu Chen, had reached an unprecedented level. Terumi, Mei and Tsunade looked at each other and nodded in agreement. Everyone. War is the biggest obstacle to peace. The 5 major countries, as the leaders of the world, waging war so unscrupulously is contrary to peace. It's better to be quiet and listen to me. The indifferent voice seemed to appear out of thin air, and it resounded through the sky without warning. The void also splashed ripples, and a small vortex continued to expand. A figure in a black trench coat came out of it. From the figure, it was obviously a middle-aged man, wearing a mask, only revealing one eye. Uchiha Obito? What did he come to Konoha for? Rinnegan? Staring at the figure that suddenly appeared, Dustless's eyes fell on the masked man, and he began to quickly wonder what Obito's plan was. He narrowed his eyes and began to speculate about Obito's plan. Chapter 327. The ninjas of the 5 major countries are disgusted with the Akatsuki. If it wasn't for the emergence of this mysterious organization, the balance between the 5 major countries wouldn't be broken. One day, the 5 major countries are closely related to each other, and when the balance is broken, it means war. Therefore, even if there are many contradictions, there won't be a violent conflict, because once it happens, it means war. War is not a game, and there is no absolute winner. It's funny. As if he heard the most ridiculous joke in the world, Inoki's face was full of disdain, showing a contemptuous smile, and sarcastically said, "A dark organization composed entirely of S-class ninjas is talking about peace." Not only Inoki's face was full of sneer, but the other Kage also showed a strange look. "First of all, let me introduce myself." Ignoring the disdainful look of the Kage, the masked man said something amazing. "My name is Uchiha Madara." As the words fell, the masked man's mask began to twist, and the dark pupil turned into a deep 3-tomo. The evil eye power was extremely powerful, and with just a casual glance, you will be addicted to it and can't extricate yourself. With the huge momentum of the whole body, he indeed has the appearance of Uchiha Madara. The acting is realistic enough, but the aura is not enough. Removing the Kan Susanoo, Dustless gave the masked man a thumbs up. If his aura is strong enough, no one will be able to recognize that he is a copy of Uchiha Madara. However, Uchiha Madara is not a character that can be easily imitated. Obito is not as strong as Uchiha Madara. Naturally, he does not have the confidence of Uchiha Madara, so in the eyes of Dustless, he is full of flaws. Dust release. Boundary stripping technique. Inoki was so angry that he directly hit the masked man with dust release, making him unable to move, and said with a cold smile, "Uchiha Madara? This old man once had the honor to see his face. Maybe your eye power is very strong, but you are still too far away from his spirit of treating all living beings as grass. If you want to surpass him, go home and hone yourself for 10 years. Without the slightest mercy, Inoki's old mouth was as sharp as a knife at the moment, viciously belittling the masked man. That's all I have to say. It's up to you to believe me or not. Hearing this, the masked man only responded with indifference. His heart seemed to have been frozen, without any human emotions. Boom, boom, boom. The white enchantment that condensed the body of Obito shattered with a bang, raising smoke and dust several feet high. The surroundings suffered the purest destruction, and the appearance was completely changed. Inoki's face was full of hope, hoping to get rid of this guy who pretended to be Uchiha Madara. To put it bluntly, the reason why Inoki was so eager to get rid of this Uchiha Madara in front of him was because he wanted to cut off the nightmare. Unfortunately, he was destined to be disappointed. A moment later, a strong chakra wave came out from the sand and dust that filled the sky. The wanton smoke was suppressed, revealing the masked man who was intact. Seeing this, the corners of Inoki's mouth twitched without leaving a trace. He was so depressed that he wanted to vomit blood. Including the masked man in front of him, there were already 2 people who had been hit by the dust release head-on. Casually glancing at Inoki, the masked man's eyes fell on Wu Chen, and a strange color flashed through his eyes. The previous fierce masked man of Kan Susanoo was in his eyes. Only by obtaining the eye power beyond Mangekyo Sharingan can one open the legendary complete Kan Susanoo. Mangekyo alone can't open the complete Kan Susanoo. Kakashi is a bug. Sasuke and Itachi's eyes are intact. This guy is... The Scarlet 3-tomo Sharingan flashed with confusion. After a while, he no longer entangled with it. There are too many unsolved mysteries in the world. There is no need to care about a small pawn. Continue the previous topic. His eyes fell on the 5 Kagero again. The masked man's body was full of rapid oppression. Coupled with his unfathomable strength, no one could ignore him. Therefore, he snatched Dustless's script. The eyes of the 5 Kage were all focused on him. Pretending to be a ghost. Wu Chen curled his lips when he saw this. His face was full of disdain. Obito, this kid, was really good at acting. He inverted right and wrong. It was easy for him to say that the red was white. As long as you hand over Nibi's Jinchuriki, everything will be over, and there will be no war. The masked man's eyes fell on Raikage. His tone was cold, but he was very serious. Obviously, he was not joking. He said solemnly, I will bring the whole world into the world of dreams. Human souls will be sublimated. Hearing this, the 4th Raikage just sneered again and again. He ignored the previous remarks of the masked man and asked directly, what if I don't hand over Yujito? The surging murderous aura gathered, and Raikage's murderous aura was revealed. Handing over his companions in exchange for peace, such a crazy thing, he knew he couldn't do it. In particular, the ambitious Akatsuki organization's purpose was obviously to plot against the whole world. Even if he really handed over Nibi's Jinchuriki to the masked man, he wouldn't let the world go. Don't agree. This is very simple. The 3 Tomo Sharingan reflected an evil light, and the masked man sneered. There is only one consequence of this. That is war. As soon as he finished speaking, the atmosphere turned grave and stern for a while before it suddenly exploded. It was like a giant rock falling into the calm water, splashing huge ripples. Not only the 5 Kage were stunned by the masked man, but even Dustless was also stunned for a short time. What is Obito's idea? Now the White Zetsu army should not be completed yet. Where did this guy get the confidence to do such a thing? Dustless frowned deeply, trying to spy on the masked man, but found that at this moment, Obito was covered with a mysterious veil, and he couldn't see through it. Compared with the previous Obito, who could be freely played with, the masked man in front of him, Dustless also felt a sense of danger. Chapter 328. The number of the ninja allied forces wasn't something to be underestimated. They were as many as the hairs on a cow, and their combat power was extremely strong. At least, they could easily defeat 100,000 White Zetsu with tens of thousands of people. The more confident you are, the harder you fall. Inoki mocked the masked man's arrogant words and said contemptuously, Since you want to fight, then the Rock Village will accompany you to the end. Inoki's murderous aura was awe-inspiring, and his tone was resolute. Unlike others, he had experienced 3 shinobi world wars, and he had already honed his will. It was unrealistic to use the word war to defeat his will. The so-called peace was won by fighting, not by begging. As the Tsuchikage-sama said, no matter who you are, no matter what kind of conspiracy you have, we will fight to the death. Even if we have to fight to the last soldier, we won't give the world to a madman like you. Taking a step forward, Mei made the final decision. Obviously, she wanted the entire Mist Village to be the first front line against the Akatsuki. Women are not inferior to men. Yondaime Raikage nodded with satisfaction and said with a sincere tone. This male chauvinism made him look at Mei in a different light. Dustless was expressionless, but his heart was extremely strange. He didn't know what Raikage would do if he knew that Mei was a spy. Gaara and Tsunade both nodded. They chose to fight against the Akatsuki, and there was no way out. You're quite motivated, but unfortunately, you're doomed to die. The masked man had already expected such a result. He sat on the gravel casually and said, Since the fall of Hashirama, no one in the world is my opponent. If you hand over the Nibi, I can reluctantly let you live, but unfortunately. After that, the masked man looked up to the sky and heaved a long sigh. His complicated tone was full of unworthiness, as if the 5 big countries were bound to be destroyed. His calm attitude made even Wu Chen frown, not to mention the 5 shadows. Looking at Obito, who was completely obsessed with the role of Uchiha Madara, his mouth squirmed. When he was about to speak, a light flashed in his mind, and Dustless took back the words he was about to say. As a bystander, Wu Chen carefully savored the scene in front of him. He played a different role and quietly observed the 2 groups of people with the eyes of a fisherman. Dustless. A sigh suddenly came, and the tone was filled with endless decay. Dustless was slightly stunned. He looked up and happened to meet the masked man's gaze. Madara-sama. After secretly greeting the 18 generations of Obito's ancestors, Wu Chen reluctantly said respectfully. At present, he still had to cooperate with Obito, this kid, to perform this play. I'll let you jump in front of the stage first. I'll end it later. Thousands of unhappiness and complaints poured into the heart. The light in Dustless's eyes disappeared in a flash. He chose to turn a blind eye. He was not a kid like Sasuke who couldn't rub sand in his eyes. There was no need to care about some trivial things. Seeing Dustless so obedient, the masked man's eyes flashed with a touch of surprise, and then he said calmly, "The value of Rinnegan can't be perfectly explained by Nagato. Now you're going to take him back." He thought that he would have to use some special means to subdue Dustless, but the development of things was surprisingly smooth. The masked man was indeed a little surprised. However, the masked man was suspicious by nature. The smoother things were, the more doubts he had. The hostility and oppression in the three Tomo Sharingan were all converged and replaced with a sense of seeing through everything. His wise eyes looked at Dustless. After a while, the masked man shook his head gently. He didn't see anything for a long time. He was secretly wary of Dustless. He didn't think that pretending to be Uchiha Madara would cause Dustless to worship him. "It's a small matter." With a slight smile, Dustless promised. For him, this was just a small matter of eating and drinking. He didn't say much, and with a golden luster floating all over his body, he turned into a rainbow and left the scene. Seeing this scene, the 5 Kage looked at each other and could see the astonishment and disbelief in each other's eyes. He can make Uchiha Dustless bow down to him. Is he really Uchiha Madara? Inoki's brows were tightly knitted together. He sneered at the idea that the masked man was Uchiha Madara. However, Dustless was so determined to obey the orders of the masked man, which made Inoki's heart doubtful. The strong pay attention to face. If this masked man was just a cat or a dog, and he made Dustless bow his head, it was really unscientific. Is this guy really Uchiha Madara? Inoki's face was gloomy. If the masked man was really Uchiha Madara, then Dustless's obedience to his orders was understandable. His thoughts rolled, and his mind began to recall the shocking battle in the Valley of the End, not letting go of any details. I'll let you have a good time, after the Jubi resurrects. Humph, I'll settle all the old and new accounts together. The corner of his mouth slightly raised, and his face evoked a sneer. Dustless thought that there was nothing wrong with Obito jumping to the front to attract the attention of the 5 Kage. After the resurrection of the Jubi, directly taking it by force was in line with Dustless's thoughts. Uchiha Madara and Uchiha Obito will both stand aside. Sorry, Conan, I can only give the Rinnegan to Obito for the time being. With a sigh, Dustless was also helpless. If he wanted to continue to use Obito, it was necessary to transfer the Rinnegan to him. Some necessary techniques have an inseparable connection with the Rinnegan. Without the Rinnegan, Obito will be greatly limited. Afterwards, recapture the Rinnegan and give it to Conan for safekeeping. After all, it was Nagato's relic. Even if the source was Uchiha Madara, now it was undoubtedly Nagato's. Dustless would naturally give Conan an explanation. Chapter 329. In the blue sky, strong wind and waves were blowing, and it was full of violent power fluctuations. The floating clouds were blown into the sky and turned into dust. Looking around, the ground was full of potholes. The potholes of different sizes were like the surface of the moon. They were scattered like stars in the night sky. In the void, the power that hasn't dissipated yet pulled the air and completely crushed it, forming a large vacuum area filled with suffocating danger. Uzumaki Naruto and Kyuubi's chakra were clearly visible. The dazzling golden luster covered a large area. Naruto, who was in Kyuubi's mouth, held his hands in front of him, looking down at the half-dead person lying in the pit in front of him, with an indifferent and confident smile on his face. Today, Naruto was no longer the kid who didn't understand the common sense of the world. He also had his own dream, Naruto's dream, which was also his motivation to become stronger. This kid's hatred for the Akatsuki is quite big, or maybe it's me. Pushing away the green leaves blocking his sight, Dustless looked at Naruto, who had entered the QB mode in the distance, and couldn't help but smile bitterly. If there's one person that Naruto hates the most, it's undoubtedly himself. Naruto's parents, his teacher Kakashi, and his relatives, including Jiraiya, were all directly or indirectly buried in Dustless's hands. It can be said that his hatred is as deep as the sea. Naturally, the Akatsuki organization that Wuxia belonged to was also taken care of by Naruto. Whoosh! Just as he was sighing with emotion, a sharp sound of something breaking through the air suddenly came from the front. A dense power of destruction, containing an energy fluctuation that was enough to destroy everything in the world, came from the front. Dustless was slightly stunned. He subconsciously raised his head and saw a huge black sphere. Rude and violent kid. Wu Chen calmly stared at the Bijadama that was whizzing over. His expression was rather helpless. His words revealed a kind of headache and hopeless feeling. However, his eyes were leisurely and carefree. He definitely didn't place the Bijadama in his eyes. Sage Mode's perception was extremely powerful. Dustless wasn't far from Naruto, only a few dozen feet away. He didn't hide his aura, so it was reasonable for him to detect Dustless's existence. But, how can this kind of pure physical attack work on me? You're not the same type of person as me. With a hint of mockery in his eyes, Dustless's body lost its texture and turned into a mass of light. Naruto's painstakingly condensed Bijadama missed its target. It rolled over Dustless's body but couldn't touch him. Boom! An unprecedented explosion sounded out from the ground behind him, and a white light that overflowed into the sky swept up. The area that was enveloped by the white light was in a mess, and everything was torn apart. A huge crater with a diameter of several kilometers appeared on the ground. It's my turn now. Dustless's indifferent face was replaced by a grim expression. He raised his right arm gently and opened his palm. His right eye also turned blue, and a trace of coldness flashed through his eye sockets. Boom! A strong repulsive force surged out of his raised palm. It was like a transparent meteor streaking across the sky, causing ripples to appear in the boundless void. Boom! The heavy air cannon hit Kyuubi's face head-on, and the powerful force directly knocked him into the air and slammed on the ground, creating a long and narrow gully. Tensigen is different from Rinnegan. The repulsive force can be released, and it's not centered on the user. Rinnegan's Shinra Tensei is centered on the user, but Tensigen's repulsive force can be released out of thin air. Just like this attack, unpredictable and impossible to defend against. This guy really has a lot of abilities. Chakra-condensed Kyuubi couldn't help but be speechless. Every time he fought with Dustless, he would use a new way to attack, and it was all unheard of. Be careful, he also knows Shodai-sama's Mokutan. Naruto's face flashed with caution. To some extent, the existence of Mokutan ninjutsu was specially arranged to deal with Bijou. Here it comes, Naruto. Kyuubi suddenly roared, his huge head looked at the sky, and he could clearly see countless cylindrical mahogany pouring down, and the number was dense like a rainstorm. Whoosh! Whoosh! Without even thinking, Nine Tails opened her mouth and revealed her dense fangs. Several small black balls shot out like bullets towards the round divine wood that was falling from the sky. The small Bijudama was much more powerful, and it contained the power of nature. Obviously, Uzumaki Naruto added seasoning to achieve the effect of a fatal blow. Boom! 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 The falling mahogany was directly hit by the Bijudama, and it burst open, and a blazing fire wave burned in the air, swallowing the mahogany into smoke. Idiot, the bright god gate is just a bait. With a sneer in his eyes, Dustless suddenly printed with one hand, and the calm chakra began to rampage, and a huge vitality overflowed from his body. Deep in the ground, countless dark green mahogany began to tumble, rolling under the ground like snakes, rushing toward the ground. Kyuubi and Naruto's feet kept jumping, as if something was about to break out of the ground. Kyuubi's eyes flashed with instinctive fear. It seems that it's Mokutan. What kind of monster is this guy? He has Sharingan beyond Mangekyo, and he also has Mokutan that Bijou are most afraid of. He even knows Senjutsu. Kyuubi's eyes were as big as a brass ring, and he cursed. He used his strength to the limit, and calmly escaped from the turbulent ground under his feet. Want to escape? The ground is the home of Mokutan. There's no place for you to step on. Mokutan, Wood Mahogany Jutsu. Chapter 330. The ground within a radius of 100 feet trembled violently. At first, it was only a slight tremor, but with Dustless's continuous release of chakra, the magnitude of the tremor became more and more extensive. Ka-ka-ka! The ground shattered, and the twisted green wood condensed together and whistled toward Kyubi. The green wood at the front suddenly turned into a ferocious dragon head and swept toward Kyubi. It easily entangled the nine-tailed beast so that it could not move. Kacha! High-density chakra erupted, and Kyubi's condensed chakra shone brighter. Its whole body was covered with a dazzling golden light like the sun. Its power was infinite, and it easily tore apart the Mokuton that entangled it with brute force. After all, Kyubi was the strongest among the tailed beasts. Now, it was in collusion with Uzumaki Naruto. After integrating Naruto's senjutsu, its strength was greatly enhanced. Ow ow ow! An earth-shattering roar came from Kyubi's mouth, and the spreading power turned into an invisible impact. In an instant, a large number of green wood was destroyed and crushed. Not bad. Seeing this, Dustless frowned. Kyubi's strength after integrating senjutsu could be described as earth-shattering. It vividly interpreted the essence of the word, destruction. It was fine if it didn't move, but if it moved, it would cause the world to collapse. That's it. With a relieved smile, the chaotic Mokuton on the ground bloomed again. New buds grew on the dense roots, containing majestic vitality. Because Dustless kept providing chakra, it became 100-meter-long wood in just a moment. The growth speed was amazing, which was one of the reasons why Mokuton was difficult to compete with. Not only could it absorb the opponent's chakra, but as long as it had chakra, it could grow without limit. Gulp, so strong. Even if Uzumaki Naruto hated Dustless, he had to admit that Dustless's strength was beyond his imagination. It was difficult to compete with him with his own strength. Once entangled by these endless trees, even if Kyubi's chakra was infinite, it would be absorbed by these endless trees. There is a limit to how strong others are. How come that bastard doesn't even have a limit? Looking around, Naruto saw that the surrounding area had turned into a forest in the blink of an eye. Naruto's face was full of astonishment. He smacked his lips and almost bit his tongue. These Mokuton were all produced by Dustless's chakra. From this, it could be seen the amount of chakra in Dustless's body. This guy has more chakra than me. Bastard! Even Kyubi, an old guy who lived for thousands of years, was furious. He was most proud of his chakra content, but now it was obviously insufficient compared to Dustless. With his chakra content, he couldn't squander it wantonly like Dustless. Infinite chakra could deceive others, but Kyubi's heart was like a mirror. There was no absolute existence. Everything had its own limit, and he also had his own limit. Dustless gave Kyubi a feeling of infinite chakra. The majestic chakra seemed to be the source of chakra, inexhaustible. With such a large-scale Mokuton, Dustless didn't even take a breath, let alone having chakra exhausted. These Mokuton, with the slow passage of time, the growth of the trees didn't decrease, but continued to expand, covering a large area and dividing it into its own territory. Kill them with one blow, Kyubi! Seeing the situation wasn't good, Naruto's pupils emitted a cold light, and his anger rose as he said hatefully. Letting Mokuton grow endlessly like this is asking for trouble. Chakra condensed. Kyubi nodded deeply. He was deeply aware of the danger of Mokuton. In the past, he and Uchiha Madara joined forces in front of Senju Hashirama. Without any nonsense, Kyubi opened his mouth and began to gather chakra. You still have confidence? Seeing Kyubi open his mouth and begin to gather Bijadama with all his strength, Dustless's eyes flashed with a sneer. His 5 fingers suddenly closed, and the boundless forest changed again. Several giant green trees more than 20 meters long rose from the ground. There were pink buds growing at the top, filled with a strong fragrance, and it was quite pungent. With a light sniff, one would feel dizzy, and the whole body would begin to fall. It was not difficult to imagine how terrible these buds would be when they all bloomed. Open for me! After a while, with Dustless's shout, the buds completely bloomed, and unknown yellow smoke floated out. A breeze blew, and the unknown smoke spread to every corner of the sky. Boom! Kyubi, who was concentrating on gathering Bijadama, suddenly fell to the ground. An unprecedented feeling of powerlessness spread throughout his body, and the condensed Bijadama also burst. This flower fragrance has such an ability. Shaking his head, Kyubi tried to wake himself up. This strange flower fragrance, as long as he smelled it, he would feel weak all over his body, and his nerves would be paralyzed. Naruto, although I don't want to admit it, we can only retreat now. It's unrealistic to fight him alone. If we want to deal with him, we need more power. Releasing a majestic murderous intent, the surrounding temperature dropped to the freezing point. Kyubi calmed down and tried to keep his mind as much as possible. Dustless in the distance was indifferent and calm. From beginning to end, he didn't even move his feet. His calm appearance made Kyubi have to accept this cruel reality. The difference between them was like heaven and earth. Damn flash bastard. Naruto's scarlet cross-shaped eyes became deeper and clearer. Naruto was unwilling to give up. He could only suppress his dissatisfaction. As Kurama said, the difference between the two sides was too big. Retreat! The hesitation on his face was replaced by determination. Naruto shouted, "As long as there's life, there's hope." After gathering a large number of companions, it's not too late to deal with him. Boom boom boom. Looking up, Kyubi's figure became more and more blurred, and disappeared in the blink of an eye. You're tuning in to the Xiaofan's Wuxia Tales YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.